This is the nameless protagonist. It has been a long time since I've been here. Well, maybe that's not perhaps the correct thing to say. I've been here, but I have not been very vocal per se. And the channel's been pretty quiet. I think that will be very much so changing now in the very near future. Do press the one in the chat if you can hear me. Excellent. There's a bit of a delay, but I'll definitely tolerate a delay. In the meantime, we will let a few more people come in. I know this was a bit spur of the moment, and I'm not really sure who's streaming at the moment, but I wanted to make this an open dojo. The objective is to just kind of chop it up a little bit with some of the things that's been in the back of my mind, things I've observed casually, or even talk about a few things you guys are pretty interested in at the moment. Let's see. We'll go ahead and get things started. Firstly, to the founders of the space, os. For those of you that are in the chat and on the playback, os. This is the nameless protagonist. I would like to make this a bit more regular, to have this dojo open to those of you that may want to just chop it up on topics that may not be covered, generally speaking, in the space. And overall, understand that there's been a lot of political shift locally as it relates to the personalities that are in the space. And while I try to stay neutral with regard to that, I'm of the strong belief that the greatest strength and weakness of the space is its capacity to resolve disagreements, and either its engagement with or aversion to the nuclear option and separation modality should you find yourself in a position where you can't come to an agreement. I think adopting a policy of, I won't say agree to disagree, but to allow for people to exist at the level at which they are and move accordingly would absolutely be of service. It's a major reason why I try to encourage the idea of the dojo model. I guess in my view, I see the space as less of a home or a residential area, but more of a road. I think that this place serves very well as a kind of highway. You have different ways in which it can be expressed. You've got a literal highway with the road. You've got sidewalks for some people. There's rail modalities. And depending on what you're interested in, there's even airways for you to follow as far as airports are concerned. Wherever you're trying to go, there is a way to get there, and the space, I think, operates best in that kind of capacity. So what you have are things like pit stops, you have rest areas, you have commercial areas where things can be sold. But I think the problem comes when you try to turn a highway into a residential area. Even though you may be able to or find yourself on the road quite often, it's not designed to function that way. There are logistical things, ordinance issues you have to take into consideration. But a failure to do so will put you at a unique disadvantage in that you may be expecting from the highway things that it was never designed to provide for you. I think if you can approach it from that angle, there's a lot of useful things that can be done. It leads the building part, by and large, up to you. It's a big reason why I'm here, to attempt to leave you with tools in the form of my subjective opinion, predicated on evidence in a way that can assist you in solving whatever issues you may be dealing with regard to where you want to go and why, and perhaps offer you some tools, some editing software to understand your reality and, with a greater level of agency, take action. This is not a hub for complaints. It's observing the information and putting it together in accordance with an agenda that suits your needs. That is the definition of intelligence. It's in that capacity I offered the idea of political Mandalorianism, for example. And one thing I did want to review and talk about is the unified theory of law that's supposed to go alongside it. And essentially what it does is it contextualizes the meaning of policy, since policy is critical to understanding the way these different moving parts interact with each other. And I think we can see in current events recently, there are many things that have taken place that are observing these laws, or these laws can be observed in action, these principles, if you will. But before we get started to that and get ready to open the panel a bit, let me go ahead and send some shout outs to folks that are here. I see Trell Bentley. Os. Jida. Os. Says the enlightened one has returned from the mountains to share his revelations after meditation and contemplation. Welcome back, nameless protagonist. Appreciate you, fam. Os. Chaos Rain. It's good, sir. Os. O'Sullivan, we got Calvin Rogers here. Good evening, sir. Os. Red Pill Sleeper Cell. I don't think I've seen you before, fam. Os. And we got the Ebo Sosa. Os, how you doing, fam? Hope you're doing well. Sheed, we here. It has been a good minute, man. I hope things are doing good for you out where you're at. It's good to see you. Os. Drew Main. Os. Good to see you as well. Prince Zachariah. I think I talked to you the other day, fam. Os. Hope you're doing well as well. Cynical Optimist. Os. Ray Hanma, the Hanma Force. Good to see you, fam. Os. We got Rael. Fam, I can't handle that picture. Oh, that is hilarious. Os. Complex Design. How you doing, fam? Os. I think I just about got everything. We got All-Star G. Os. And Gundam Natako 00. Os. Peace. Ah, McDrama Bear. There you go. Os. So let me go ahead and give you guys the revisitation of political Mandalorianism. And I'll start with the unified theory of law and the preamble that's supposed to go alongside it. The axioms, an introduction to the seventh axiom. And from there, I'll open up the panel and we can kind of begin our conversation with that and just have a freestyle session, I suppose, of whatever is on your mind in the spirit of the dojo. But starting with this idea of the unified theory of law, it's a set of 3 presuppositions. First, Law serves as the superposition between politics and religion. Law serves as the superposition between politics and religion. I think that is a useful point to consider, simply because what you find when you observe civilizations in general, that typically speaking, the religion serves as a kind of cultural seed through which the people contextualize their value system from. And from that value system, things that aren't covered by the religion get covered by the expression of politics that are present there. I struggle to find a civilization that hasn't based their legal system off of some historical component and some sort of religious undertone, and from it, use the two to triangulate what their politics ultimately becomes. I think it's rife when we see it within our own. The Pledge of Allegiance cited, and the repeated mentioning of God, things that are all throughout our Constitution, which is a contract, which we'll get to, and the ways these things can express themselves both on a physical, natural, and social level. When we speak of the idea of superposition, it's a direct reference to this idea of particle wave theory, where in the presence of observation, the particle behaves like a particle, but when not observing it, it behaves like a wave. In other words, it becomes fluidly whatever it needs to as it relates to where the attention is put. Thus, law universally acts through the medium of religion and politics as a superposition, giving creed to this first rule within this unified theory of law. Law serves as the superposition between politics and religion. Number two, the highest form of law is the contract. And I think this right here is the crux. When you observe the way societies operate, and even in everyday conversation, there's an unspoken and an oftentimes spoken agreement to utilize this understanding of the contract. And it's an agreement between two parties or one or more parties to agree to a set of law, a pattern of agreed upon ideas that help facilitate things. And that'll become very important when we get into the preamble of political Mandalorianism here. It's useful in that part of being able to form a contract is a thing that is intrinsically tied to not just adulthood, but your power as a citizen or a participant within that group. You'll find also that there are many degrees with which that contract can be expressed. And for many, this is where there's an exploitative presence potentially realized within this idea of the contract. And so contracts that are put forward that deem something ethical and fair are put forward as well. You could even make the argument that the strength of a particular culture can be made realized through the kinds of contracts one is able to make. It, in other words, is the most secure expression of law, the contract. And tying it to this third rule, number three, therefore, law facilitates the flow of policy in whatever modality it is realized. That's going to be very important when we get into the preamble here. but it sets the definition and understanding when all three of these rules essentially are put together and played in motion. Law serves as the superposition between politics and religion. The highest form of law is the contract. Therefore, law facilitates the flow of policy in whatever modality it is realized. I think that covers the entirety of the spectrum and gives a perfect backdrop into the meaning of policy. I think that many people have found themselves disconnected from one of those two rules to realize that one, they're engaging in policy, and number two, they may even be subject to it because they were not involved or aware of what the contract is. And I will be doing a separate video on the unified theory of law, specifically a separate live stream where we'll go into a lot of nuances related to contracts because they're an interesting topic to study. And you'd be surprised how thorough this idea of a contract has solved so many issues as it relates to human beings attempting to navigate society, come to agreements, and most especially and most importantly, deal with negotiation and diplomacy, which I believe are some of the highest expressions of policy, at least in an ideal sense. With that, we'll pause for just a moment to acknowledge a couple more people who've come in, and we'll get to the preamble. And once we do the preamble, I'll go ahead and open up the panel so we can have a little dojo session. Let's see, we've got Mensa Noir. Appreciate you, fam. Us. Wow, we got an MVP here. The Quiet Storm. Us, he says, peace, nameless. Good to see you, family. AB Media. Us. Dark Nova, I am indeed here. It's good to see you again, fam. Us. And it's funny, I've got the shakuhachi playing in the background, but yeah, I got a lot to say. That instrument has been challenging to work with and very counterintuitive, but I'm gonna definitely keep working on it, and hopefully I'll get some stuff recorded pretty soon. It definitely has a lot of beneficial meditative qualities to it, and as I was mentioning to you before, this idea of suizen, it's relatively new. I encourage you to Google it, but it's directly related to the shakuhachi. And even when you get into the two kanji that form suizen, it does make reference to the flow of water, but it's actually making a parallel to wind. And it's useful in that regard because you already understand its correlation to the way of the sword. Its ability to flow like wind, kaze no koi. In this instant, mizu is, or the sui is more like the air, the kaze, if you will. And it's an understanding the mind state that the Zen aspect is realized. Thus, suizen, the flute, in a way, becomes the sword. It's been humbling. It's been very, very humbling. So I'll be looking forward to sharing my progress with that. We've got Diaspora L. Os, good to see you, fam. Culture crack. Indeed, a long time no see, friend. Os. Oh yeah, the shakuhachi, it'll humble you, but it's very, very cool when you really finally produce a real strong raw sound. That raw note. You could just play raw and be good just off the strength of that. It'll help you correct your posture. It'll give you a strong flow to continue through, and it does improve your kinjutsu. So Highly recommend. And it's funny because I had a choice between that and the pan drum, but my intuition was telling me not to be lazy. Mm, I agree. But let me get into the preamble here, and I'll open up the panel to whoever is interested. So, we reviewed the unified theory of law, which again states law serves as the superposition between politics and religion. Two, the highest form of law is the contract. And three, therefore, law facilitates the flow of policy in whatever modality it is realized. It's here we get into policy in and of itself. Individuals, parties, incorporated entities, and states can engage in the act of policy. Law is the language of policy. Thus, politics is the means by which policy is made realized. Diplomacy and negotiation are preferred methodology through which politics is engaged. War is politics and policy imposed in the absence of negotiation and diplomacy with the goal of submitting the opponent to one's will by way of hard, soft, or smart power. I think what we've been seeing in world current events is quite literally everything we just said. I think the key takeaways here is once you understand what policy is, the role that law plays in it, and you understand then that politics is that vehicle for policy, and that policy ultimately is the will of either the individual, the entity, the state, or the party. The preferred methodology of engagement with politics is diplomacy and negotiation. But these modalities are preferred. What's important to understand is that at times, when one is not able to leverage a measure of diplomacy and negotiation, this is where you get into the use of power. Power is absolutely critical because it contextualizes the means by which you can engage in diplomacy and negotiation. If there's too great of a difference in your capacity for power and those of the individuals with which you negotiate, you will find yourself subject to war. War, in and of itself, doesn't necessarily have to be destructive in a physical sense. This is what hard power is. Soft power, or the ability to influence through coercion and other means that are very nonviolent, can be just as effective, if not just as destructive, if not more so. And it's under that context, under that condition, that people find themselves fully confused on the difference between soft power and negotiation and diplomacy. Recently, we had the president of Ukraine visit the White House. We saw this modality full on in display. In an effort to come to a negotiation, they found themselves at a great disparity in power. There is an axiom that a good friend of mine, Sandog, you may know in the space, learned while he was in officer training school. It's a phrase he repeats often, which is, quote, your capacity for peace is in direct correlation to your capacity for war, end quote. Ultimately, if you don't have the power to enforce what your word is, If you can't produce the leverage with which to engage in diplomacy and negotiation, what you are truly experiencing is war. And again, war is defined as politics and policy imposed in the absence of negotiation and diplomacy, with the goal of submitting the opponents to one will by way of hard, soft, or smart power. Too often, people mistake soft and smart power for negotiation and diplomacy because they are ignorant, unaware, or unable to realize their absolute position of power. We've been hearing from the government these days this idea of peace through strength. This is exactly what's being spoken about. I'd like for that to be kept in mind while I review once more the 6 axioms of political Mandalorianism and reveal the 7th one, with which I can go into greater details later, where I dedicate a live stream directly to really getting into that with a few special guests who specialize on the topic that I think would serve great benefit to offer their subject matter expertise on the subject. But we've got a couple more people who've come in, and I'll make some acknowledgments before we continue, and we'll open up the panel. Let's see, I'm listening's here. I don't know if I got you earlier. Os. Ice Princess, it's been a while. It's good to see you again. Os. This is when we were talking about earlier about the shakuhachi. Yes, indeed, power is very much so critical. And if that power isn't from a source that originates from you, irrespective of the treaties and contracts you may have with others, if you can't bring that to bear on your own volition, you're introducing a disparity. And if your policy contrasts rather with another person's policy, it always boils down to who has the ultimate authority to enforce it. Hard, soft, or smart power. Takman Clan Killer, 187. Os. It has definitely been a minute. I haven't seen that name in a while. Ice Princess says that talk with him and Trump should have happened behind closed doors. Yeah, that needed to come to he needed a signature first before they kept going with all of that. It gave me almost a sense like there could have been saboteurs in the audience intentionally antagonizing that kind of result or conclusion. It was very unfortunate. Although, to my understanding, he did double back and attempt to renegotiate, so to speak. But once more, people have to understand their absolute position with regard to that. Hurricane Greg, blessings. Os. Mansa Noir offers a book, The Paradox of American Power by Joseph Nye. This man is a political science genius. I really like the way he's really been harpooning on this idea, and it's been lockstep with the advancement of technology and ways that smart power can be made realized, which is the combination of hard and soft. You'd be surprised. I'm going to have to sit down one day and really go over the Bill of Rights and demonstrate how the fourth industrial technology is really pushing the need to reevaluate what some of these amendments really mean, really what they mean, and see how, in a lot of ways, these things have not only been undermined over the years, that in many instances, especially in the case of the Third and Fourth Amendment, the Fourth Industrial Revolution is literally changing what politics even means. It's making redundant a lot of points, especially when people's definition of what privacy, etc., even means. There is definitely a citizen component that's involved in a lot of these things that I think it's not only taken for granted, these choices are being made for people, and it's shaping a future that may open the door for a technocratic autocracy that isn't even run by a human mind, potentially. And I'm not really sure people are really, truly ready for what a Skynet could mean, especially if it's taken its cues from the collective unconscious of the current snapshot of humanity. He makes a quote, "Culture is the most tremendous soft power a nation can wield. It speaks when armies fall silent." Zhu Juntao, former Chinese president. I absolutely concur with that. We've got Hurricane Greg. Missed you earlier. Os. Asada Muhammad. Salamu alaikum, sister. It's good to see you. We got Lust. I don't think I mentioned you earlier. Os. He says the greatest medicine could be the strongest poison. Yeah, the only difference between the two is volume. Quite literally. Tom Clancy is pretty much a fictional library of what's probably going on at any point in time with all of this. Yeah, definitely look forward to that. I think it's really worth viewing a lot of these laws that are in place now that you have an inalienable access to, that quite frankly are daily being challenged by fourth industrial revolutionary technology and are being pretty much held in check by a couple ethics clauses that most people have never even taken time to consider. I still think that the greatest challenges to the Bill of Rights are likely within the third and fourth, because the Industrial Revolution has changed the definition of what these things can mean in so many different ways. It's staggering. It's staggering. And I don't think there's an answer that the government can presume to present on its own volition. There's a voluntary component that the citizenry has to be involved with. Techno-feudalism has been for a while, fam, unfortunately. Gundam Notaku says, you mentioned the samurai class becoming a monopolist class during the economic development of Japan, like Mitsubishi and Toyota in the past. Is there literature covering this topic? Yes, not translated in English, but if you just do a general revision and review of the Meiji period of Japan, it's everywhere. Just study the history of Emperor Meiji and you'll see it all over the place. I come across a lot of this information when I study the history of the samurai class in general as it relates to studying specific ryu or koryu or historical martial modalities, since many of these things ended up vanishing during this period of 1865, 1861-ish to about 1910, this particular time period. Many of these practices were running out of people to pass down the arts to. And many individuals that couldn't make a living, they found themselves doubling down on this business modality. And so after World War II, when Japan was told they had to demilitarize, many of these martial sciences found ways of becoming sportified. And it's through studying the origins of that particular track of history that I came across references such as the former samurai class being very terrible at business, because at the time, business as a social class, the merchant class, bankers in general were seen as lesser than. The Industrial Revolution, generally across the board, is a key time period where the merchant class of people unanimously begin to rise in power. That really needs to be a separate, probably series I do. I'm willing to put in some time to actually review that because it's interesting how Booker T. Washington at this exact time period was very critical for the latter portions of Japan's industrialization to succeed, as they actually copied Booker T. Washington's model when they came to the United States to study. I think there's a lot we can learn from that particular and specific time period because I'm seeing it rhyme with the Industrial Revolution or the Fourth Industrial Revolution that we're going through right now. Case talking about the earlier topic. Yes, please do. I think the aha moments that it's going to reveal are very interesting. I agree, fam. I'll take a look. I'll take a look on what I can find, some primary sources on Emperor Meiji. Most of them tend to be documents, but I'll see what I can find. I'll see what I can drudge up. I'll write that in my notes. But let me go ahead. Copying. And I'm going to see if I can put in the chat link to the panel if you're interested in coming up and chopping it up. And we don't have to speak specifically just on what we've mentioned here, but it would be preferable. Let's see, I think I got the comment starred. Hopefully that still hyperlinks. Let me know if it doesn't. But Dwayne, it's good to hear you. Good to see you here in the chat also, fam. Okay. And we got one person here. Chaos, you're on.
What's good, my brother? What's good?
What's going on?
Yes, I think many things the dojo is used for. Also, people forgot dojo is also used for sparring to handle grievances.
Indeed, they can be.
Yes, even people that had some against each other, I see squared off in the dojo. That will be a well to settle certain problems. But besides that, it's interesting. Nameless. We don't understand. When we talk about male masculinity and the ability to stomp and make your presence be known, I think a lot of people in the West just lost sight of that. For those that were pushing back, because I was listening to certain channels, and some people were taking the side of Zelensky and have no idea personally that if you come here just to beg to get some extra money from the United States to continue your little useless bloodshed, that's really pretty much ineffective right now. I'm not sure what's going on over there personally, unless we read it or we're down there, that you're wasting United States money for your own benefit. And you could tell that this man does not respect who's now in position of power, is how he carries himself in, the way how he his appearance. Now, if anybody could find videos of him, visiting America years when we had the other administrations, that was he carrying himself like this before come to this new administration? If so, then it tells you that he really came in with bad faith. and really was just trying to set a presence and trying to, I guess, I don't know if I want to say the word son United States, but that's what he's trying to do in a way to make us feel so bad that people are losing their limbs, their body parts. But I say that's not United States problem. You know.
So with that, and what we can do is I will go over the axioms here.
Okay.
And it's interesting because some of the principles you're talking about are expressed in the axioms very clearly. And I think that's why I like this kind of format to view these modalities of power and how they interplay. And you tell me if you can't see how
Okay.
these axioms sort of sort out everything you just talked about.
Okay.
So, given the context that we said earlier about the unified theory of law and the preamble, where we understand that any policy that is not animated in the spirit of diplomacy and negotiation is essentially war, where the goal of the war isn't necessarily to kill your opponent, but to cause them to submit to the will of the other by way of hard, soft, or smart power.
Okay.
So, with that in mind, axiom one, it states political parties are tools, not families or religions.
Okay.
Number two, better to be the power spoken to than the other way around.
Okay.
Number three, the lowest common denominator is the lifeblood of any system. Act accordingly. Number four, facts win debates, but emotions win elections.
Okay, I think I follow that.
Number five, since everything has a price, everything has a cost, often paid in death and taxes.
Okay.
In axiom six, when the minority, everything is a matter of timing. In the majority, everything is a matter of time.
Okay. Okay.
So when you observe the way he was presenting himself in the greater scenario here, we've got somebody from an inferior position of power failing to understand that there's a different energy that is animating this administration. There were a great myriad range of concessions offered to him by the previous administration, followed by there being an economic incentive for this conflict to continue. If you look at the state of Europe as it is right now, it is effectively stable, trying to stave off as best it can since the Brexit era, economic obliteration. And at this point, the only way to get yourself out of a deep, deep recession that many parts of Europe are in right now is a wartime economy.
Okay.
And currently, that environment out there serves as the best opportunity to have that happen. So when you look at the general narrative that's surrounding that and all of the executive orders that have come out of the White House lately, they speak to a redress and a reorganization and reorientation to this idea of NATO, especially since it appears that the United States has been used as a kind of big brother to force everybody to deal with the dirty work that it starts.
Okay.
When you consider the idea that he got, what was it, 400 billion?
Yeah.
Under the idea, under the concept and understanding of it being a grant. That's profound.
Yeah.
That's profound. So when this administration is like, look, we need that back, and he's immediately quipping with, look, this was given to me. It was nothing I signed said I had to give this back.
Yeah.
People should have known what time it was. So I don't want to go too deep on that specific topic because, again, people have their view of the bigger picture as they see fit. Here's what I would advise people pay attention to. I'll sum it up by simply saying, if you look at the pattern of behavior that an empire demonstrates, That is the Tao with which the United States is aligning itself with. And I would pay close attention to the way it behaves with Russia. I think that is about to dictate the new global order. The argument and the way it was presented was if you don't agree to this, then you're on your own in figuring this out. And as much as planet Earth is attempting to make the administration look as though they're abandoning something or there's some sort of bad guy,
Yeah.
they've made it clear when they went to these conferences with NATO and to other countries all throughout the EU that this idea of strength or peace through strength and America first means exactly what it's saying. Everything is pointing towards energy independence, which is a middle finger to OPEC. All of this drilling for the energy independence is a step in the direction of shifting economic models of being the main manufacturing hub. And if that's the case, then there is a direct intention to not necessarily depend on people on the outside to provide that. And it appears as though the relationship it's trying to seek economically is one of my oil for your minerals. And it's ironic that it's like this because for a long time, this is how we've been with Africa and other third world Aboriginal belt regions. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, U.S. guy said, "I offer you some, you offer me some back in return." We had to make some form of deal of an exchange, and that's one thing Donald Trump is known for, making deals. You get me? Um,
Well, take a look at,
yeah.
here's one point, and you can go ahead and continue. I just found it interesting that anybody that was reading between the lines when he was in there, if we put a facility out there, an extraction operation to acquire the aluminum and other hard metal resources that are there, who is going to risk interrupting US contractors knowing it could escalate to a war? That is your form of security provisions intrinsically. I think that the open demand for hard military assets is what set the tone off for everything. But if people are paying attention, everybody knows that if the US is there extracting, no one's going to go there, especially since a lot of those assets are there in that Crimea region or close to it. So if we know that Putin wants that region, then how is it not the best idea tactically to have US contractors out there and you know they're going to build more permanent assets? Those assets then can serve as temporary intelligence hubs. Plus, that gives them a jump off point potentially since they're so close to China. And you know that ultimately that's going to be the new theater in the very immediate future in the Indo-Pacific. There's so many layers. The fact that that was intentionally being bucked to gain access to hard military assets in a animated in the spirit of entitlement tells you that he probably wasn't the main one that was up there trying to push it. He was acting in behalf of another interest, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree. I think I mentioned this to be just ask her, I wonder if this is like a plot, because one thing Trump has been reiterating, if people pay attention very closely about the War III. And I told people many times that out of all the wars we had throughout history, this is the one of the most serious and most lethal and dangerous wars of all, the third one. And a lot of people said that they don't want nothing that or are not ready for that. I tell people many times, you see these billionaires have these hiding bunkers, these shelters. They are preparing the atmosphere. You're not gonna know when day or time. You only go follow when, like anything, like you're a samurai. You know when the wind flows. That would give you more certainty what is to come.
Chaos, you sounded a little bit muffled. Maybe
That must
just where your mic is.
Hello, I sound good now? I sound clear?
Yeah, you're back, fam.
Let me repeat that. Like I said, like a samurai like yourself, I'm nameless. You only know when war really is about to go on the way when the wind blows. You get me? And they're setting the atmosphere. That's why when you see a president was keep repeating it constantly with Zelensky about it. and these billionaires that already have the bunkers set up, they're only going to set the atmosphere for it. And I say this again because Nails wasn't listening. You will not know the date or time when the war will really start. Is you're only going to have to get a sense of what is to come, and always be alert and be prepared. And don't move in fear, because fear is weakness at this point. You get me?
Well, that's the whole value. Oh, there's so many layers. I don't want to go in the deep end with this, but
Yeah,
I'll
no,
simply say that
yeah. But I just
well,
want to lay that out. Yeah.
no, I'm highlighting the importance of intelligence here, because that's where you address every piece of that. And all I will say is, hopefully, you guys pay attention to what's been going on with Tulsi Gabbard and the CIA lately. There's a lot going on, a lot. And all of these little tributaries form the stream of conclusion that of why things happen the way they did and where they're likely headed towards. So if he doesn't make any hard shifts to make an agreement to this and simmer this down and upset Europe, I think we observe a timeline where things start to escalate pretty aggressively, because I don't see this administration feeding into that. And what it will start to do is look at who takes advantage of NATO being busy. And I can't help but think that that would be the cue that potentially sets off more tension within the Indo-Pacific, which would mean the United States being more aggressive with its decided objective policy of what we're seeing potentially as being the Monroe Doctrine in motion and manifest destiny. Okay. I think that'll be worth kind of reviewing and going over and taking a look at why the Gulf is so strategic in this, what tapping into greater oil reserves looks like, and this idea of energy independence and the insistent push of improving the electrical grid all over the country and what that entails. But let me make a couple more acknowledgments. Again, the link is in the chat. I think I starred the link, so you guys are free to click. Yeah. And you can bring up anything you guys are interested in chopping it up with. Let's see who we got that came in. We got Landon. He says, has he been training with Larry Dickham? Oh man, man, shout out to that and your boy Black Dynamite. We got Spain Man. Os. Good to see you, man. We got Gold P. Os. Said, man, what's happening? Always good to step into the dojang. Indeed, Allah is all in all. Gold P. Indeed, fam. Os. For those that don't know, that's Korean for dojo. Mike Rizzi says Zelensky practicing the will to power in the wrong way. Yeah. Wrong time, wrong place, wrong posture. I still agree with Ice Princess earlier. I don't think that should have been on TV when it did, because the way those reporters were trolling and throwing fire on that scenario, throwing gasoline on that dumpster fire, it's crazy. Got Smitty 753. Os. It's good, fam. Let's see.
I'm Namer.
Jafar Os. What's good, fam? Says they're using the same playbook with Gaza with reconstruction. Yeah. Destroy and rebuild, man. The money is in the rebuilding. Contracts are crazy. Ask anybody that does international logistics. Actually, just ask Napoleon. That's how he got his. Shout out to the Rockefellers. Rael says all of these woke policies have originated by European elites. We ain't feeling that weak shit. Keep that bati boy shit deso. Yes, man. I hear you, man. Like you, when I deal with bati boy thing there, no did he fire for that.
Yeah, boy, them not mean so. Me not want no Babylon here. Problem is now nothing here, Irie.
Ryle says, in order to reassert global dominance, Russia and America has to be weakened, and that's through war. This whole thing is a setup. Yeah, your Scorpio sense is going off too, man. The U.S. are pinning NATO against the wall. NATO needs U.S. influence and presence in the region to keep Russia at bay, which this is the context of it all, man. I think they're looking to see what they can do to either escalate, but I don't know, fam, because that would do it if, again, you sent in U.S. refine and recompense assets out there. But I think Europe is the one that wants those assets, which is why they're salty. And they want that because, you know, they're running out of money right now. Name it real quick. I'm gonna finish doing these shout outs in the chat and then we'll go ahead and let you jump in.
Just give me a minute. Can I handle something?
Got brother Alonzo. No, it's no problem, fam. Got brother Alonzo here. He says, with the U.S. being super consumers, I don't know about too many countries wanting us weak. Plus, our dollars circulate and fund their globe. For now, they're BRICS is making its rounds, man, and you'd be surprised at the people potentially entertaining that mess. It's gotten quite popular. And let's see. It was 2 against 1, Trump and Vance, and Zelensky all by himself. Yeah, he need to get a suit. Go PS DEI. Explain DEI. We can. That's explain with Title 7 and how that got hijacked. And we got better you here. Os. Yeah, let me let you get your opening statement, Namor. Os, what's good with you, fam? Namor? He did say he was going to AFK.
Namor.
Yeah, he'll be back.
All right.
But
okay, I'm
yeah,
back.
go ahead, man. Okay, yeah.
Excuse
We're giving you intro, man. What's good, fam?
All I can say right now is deep in the heart of Oromia, a lone samurai sits patiently underneath an oda tree. Lo and behold, a young figure comes from all the way from Midr Bahri. That's modern day Eritrea, folks. Traveling far and wide. And comes bearing gifts of some highly prized, as it's called, Mies Integrinia, but Edge and Amharic, that's honey wine. The samurai welcomes his gift and offers him some green tea as they contemplate the madness that surrounds them.
Indeed. Over some injera and shiro, because why not?
Well, Lent is going to start, but then again, tomorrow is March 2nd. That's an important day in Ethiopian history. That's, they celebrate the Battle of Adwa.
What's that represent?
Battle of Adwa. The Battle of Adwa, March 2nd, 1896, in what is Tigray, an area called Adwa, when 80,000 troops, 80,000 warriors under Menelik II repelled a force of 16,000 Italians and Eritreans from trying to conquer and colonize Ethiopia. As a result,
it was a big day.
Yeah, it was a big, and what was the pretense was it was Article 17, I believe, of a treaty that was signed called Wuchale. But because of the difference in translations and this war that escalated afterwards, they had signed another treaty called the Treaty of Addis Ababa, in which Ethiopia's sovereignty was recognized and Eritrea as an Italian colony was also recognized. But a lot of people don't know the precursor to all of that goes back to the Battle of Dogali inside Eritrea in late January of 1887. But that's another history for another discussion. Anyway,
fair enough.
I'm just thinking about I just see this world for what it is, and I'm not surprised. And the more you see, the more you become a bit cynical. As much as we need optimism, but then again, cynicism, optimism are the yin and yangs in this world. With that, thank you. I appreciate you having me in the dojo.
Oh, it's no big deal,
Unfortunately,
fam.
this might turn. Unfortunately, this may turn into a capoeira session instead of a bushido class. Sorry, kendo class. Excuse me.
You forget Brazil was
Huh.
the one part outside of Japan that has the highest number of Japanese diaspora.
That's
I'll
true.
just reminded you that.
Japan, also countries like Peru, countries like also certain countries in South America have a lot of diaspora communities, especially Middle Eastern in particular.
Well, yeah,
Some people
especially
don't know that.
recently. Yeah, there's a lot of people I've met from Colombia who are married to people who are Arab. I didn't
You'd be
know how
surprised.
common that was. Yeah.
Oh, you'd be surprised how many Lebanese and Syrians are inside Paraguay, Brazil, parts of Colombia, and whatnot. Many of whom who've been in there for at least a few generations.
Mm.
As far as the Japanese diaspora goes, people forget one of Peru's presidents was actually of Japanese descent.
That
Alberto
I didn't
Fujimori.
know. Didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were deep
So,
over there, man, especially during that period immediately after the Meiji era. That's when they started going over there and they got involved in the business industry. They helped industrialize a lot of those regions.
absolutely. And yes, folks, always count on Nema to divert the conversation and digress everything.
Well, that's
I
fine.
take myself accountable.
That's fine.
But
I can.
But the interesting conversation you guys were saying about regarding BRICS and everything. This BRICS is on the rise. But at what cost? And how does each person benefit to which scenarios we're talking about? That's why the question of Cicero's always needs to be asked. Who benefits from what situation and how people conduct themselves?
Well, I think it's obvious. If you consider the general hustle, so if you have to go through the IMF because you have to adhere to Article 18 and Article 24 of the UN Charter that states international communications have to be done in the open and currency is counted as that, and the reserve currency for the planet Earth is the dollar. If you are a so-called third world country who has a terrible interest rate with the IMF, because again, you're a third world country, then in order to trade with somebody that's 50 miles over your border, because they're close or have access to a water source, shout out to Ethiopia and Egypt, then,
Ooh,
you see what I'm saying? You got to now go through the IMF, send bonds to them. They give you back the bills. It's at a disrespectful interest rate. And so now, in order to run your government, you've got to arrange a bureau that collects the difference with regards to that. And since you don't have the hard cash to do it because your local currency isn't worth anything, you have to use your hard assets that are there. And then you don't even get to determine how that's done. They do it for you. So they send a whole third party out there and extract those resources and pretty much pay you nothing and take everything. How long did they think that model was going to be sustainable? You understand what I'm saying?
And it's not just the IMF. Also, the World Bank is also involved in this.
Well, that's the International Monetary Fund that the World Bank operates out of. So we're talking about the same thing.
That's true.
It's an order of operations thing.
And let's not forget how many nations are also involved in this in development aid hustle as well, to control one another. I mean, not just in the West, also in the Middle East. Some of these countries do so just to gain a certain level of influence, especially in Iran.
Duh. What else?
BGS. What's good, fam?
BGS.
You catch anything that we said earlier about
me so much?
Did you catch anything what I said about the unified theory of law and the preamble here for political Mandalorianism?
I heard bits and pieces of it. I got to see where you're going to go with it.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Because law is flexible. Law depends on morality,
yep.
and morality depends on environment, and that is always shifting. That's why I heard you talk about the Bill of Rights, which is goes from the social contract going back into the mid 1700s. So the social
Yes.
contract was actually formed. So and
Yes.
that was uh, during during the first industrial revolution. Okay,
Right.
and that's
Right.
what built for. So this we're talking about something that's 250 years old. So naturally, the environment has drastically changed. So
Mm-hmm.
naturally, it's not going to fit because you have a different environment. And then and
Exactly.
then you got more countries that are connected that don't adhere to uh, these particular Bill of Rights or this social contract that's in the West. So it's not exclusive to the West because you expanded the empire, expanded the
Exactly.
civilization. So
Exactly. Everyone has their own remix of it. And
yes,
that's where I was, yeah, that's why one day I'll have a separate conversation just to review that, because you'd be surprised how many people don't know what the Bill of Rights even is. And it's taking little time to even read it. You understand what I'm saying?
and it's getting less and less when a C becomes 50%. Okay, so
Oh my God.
yeah, so
It's scary, man. Especially when you're dealing with people who are in like Ivy League colleges that don't know this
yes,
stuff.
I know, I know. I hear it all the time from the PhDs. It's just they shake their heads, but it is what it is.
You have to. I mean, if that's the case. You have to ask yourself, who's training these people? Who are they being
We
educated with?
Well, the thing is, I'm old enough and I had children, so I know exactly. And when they were actually putting these policies out, I said, "This shit's not going to work." Okay, I was
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
saying to myself, "This shit's not going to work." So that's like I made sure give my children additional training outside of what the school was teaching them. And they the thing is with school, anything outside what the teacher assigns, kids will pitch and bitch and fuss stuff like that.
Uh,
You don't know why you're
Excuse me,
actually
math
doing
teacher. Could you repeat the last 20 seconds because you're going in and out for moments. Your audio is
it.
a little faulty.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm talking to nameless, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah, man. I think the hidden village got some enemy nin that may not
Yeah,
like some of these topics. So I
yeah,
gotta
yeah,
codify it.
yeah. You do have to codify, especially if I come up. So, um,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying is that
Mm-hmm.
because I got grandkids and I've seen this stuff over and over and over again,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I know how I was taught, and I've seen the degradation of how people are taught. Okay, they used to teach you. They used to try to teach you for mastery, even if it's a basic thing. They try to teach you to master the basics, but they don't teach that anymore. Okay, basically they
Yeah.
do enough. They do just enough to babysit you and do just enough to make you functional,
You know,
and
I
it's
like
getting
Yeah.
worse and worse.
I
Go ahead.
like using this story of this anecdote that really hit home for me. To your
Mm-hmm.
point, BGS.
Mm-hmm.
My brother, when we were a military family.
Mm-hmm.
By the time my brother was in second grade, he still couldn't read.
Mm.
And we got to the summer where he was supposed to be going into third grade.
Okay.
And my mom at the time,
The most important grade.
she,
That's what
yeah,
it
that's critical.
No,
Well, fourth one is critical, but
third is where they measure you. Okay, because there's
right,
a whole thing about that's
the
when they
fast
start
tracking.
fast tracking. Yeah, fast
Yep.
tracking. This kid's going to the prison. This kid going to go to the regular workforce, and this kid is going to be elevated. So
Right.
there's a 10.
So
Aptitude test.
so let me finish I'm
Go
gonna
ahead.
finish the story real quick to your point, BGS. It
Mm-hmm.
so by the time he's in second grade, he
Mm.
can't read. And
Okay.
so
How does that
we end
happen?
up they just pass him, fam.
I
And
know, I know,
this is in 97. This is
I
happening.
know, but you got parents, and you
I,
know when your kid can't read.
well, she was
1997. You listen
working.
right
She was
there.
working, and then
Bullshit.
I'm in school too. He
It is
couldn't
bullshit.
read.
It is
Bullshit.
bullshit.
You know what? You know, nameless bullshit. I worked there. I worked a blue collar job, and 60 hours a week. Bullshit. I don't
I
want to
didn't
do
know. I didn't know. But I'm
Okay.
saying what
Okay.
we did was we got him enrolled in private school,
that.
right?
Okay. Uh-huh.
And over the summer,
Hmm.
it took about 2.5 months. And by the time he was done, he was reading at a seventh grade level
Yeah.
before he started his third grade year.
Yeah.
That's
But
how
what?
quickly it turned around.
It doesn't take long. I mean,
No.
well, especially when you compare it to the slow campers that they train in the school system. So by the time
Mm.
most seventh graders read at a third grade level, so it doesn't take that long.
Yeah.
I want.
Yeah.
Did they use hooked on phonics in the private
No,
school?
it was a private school. It was a private school. They had their own separate scenario. It was just textbook people sitting down, giving a damn. That was
Yeah, that's all it
really
is.
all it was.
All it is, and I don't know why it's so hard. Okay, every adult, I don't care how hard you work, you got 30 minutes a day. Okay, if you sit down
Mm-hmm.
and have read to you or have your kid read to you for 30 minutes a day, they're well ahead. So I should tell my daughter, I don't want to hear that bullshit because I did it.
Mm-hmm.
Be just a name. I mean, a nameless. I think one story with my father. One time I tried to get me to read some old book, and I don't know what I did with it, but it was called with Julius Caesar,
Yeah.
and this was
Hmm.
like back in the 90s.
What is it? Is it Shakespeare?
I believe so. And
Okay.
I don't know if I tore the book, but because now years later I started to get the wind of the reading
Hmm.
later on in life. But back then, when I look at certain books that I kind of put on the shelf myself,
Hmm.
that Julius Caesar book was one of the few books that 'cause, when you're a kid and depending don't like to read,
Hmm.
and you have a parent that's somewhat attentive, or there might be some consequence, but wasn't much, but I had to
Hmm.
force you then. Obviously, I reflect back then, like decades ago, that that was
He,
one of the first.
he gave you something difficult to read, so when you read anything else, it's easy.
Yeah, and I never mastered, but I just sit there, and crack it open, and just try to read it.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. So you reading.
Like you go ahead.
I just did it with my grandson because he didn't like reading either, and he was getting ready to fail English, and so I had to, so I had him, but he likes to act, so I started having him. He started reading Hamlet, and
Mhm.
what
Ah.
the thing is that Shakespeare is very difficult to read. So if I make you read
Of course.
Shakespeare, then when you go back to reading regular prose, it's easy, and that's what he found out.
Mhm.
It's funny that same exact situation helped improve my writing when I got into Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
And because
Ah.
I learned that in the military. So
Hmm.
my whole thing was I was always trying to make characters, and it was
Okay.
difficult to find, you never found black characters. So I always had to like make these
Invent 'em.
elaborate stories,
Hmm.
using dark elves and stuff like that, but they're always considered evil. So I
Hmm.
had to really double down on learning how to write narratives
Hmm.
and doing research on the lore to figure out how could this make sense for the party. And I just inadvertently ended up reading dozens and dozens of college level source book material and putting
Hmm.
together builds and
Hmm.
researching real life cultures that these things were inspired by. So the
Hmm.
common denominator was I found something I was interested in, and through that vector of being interest, I acquired that skill set almost effortlessly as a byproduct.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
like what
Well,
BJ said was you
you're
basically,
motivated. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, you'd be
basically
surprised at when
stick.
you find that.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I did that for my nephew because he didn't like to read either, and he was because he's a military kid, and my he came to live with me because his mother was going to Japan, and his dad was in Korea, so they sent him to us. So we had him for about 5 years, and he was a D student. Okay, so he didn't like to read,
Mhm.
yada yada yada. So I knew that he liked to read comic books. Okay, comic books was interesting. Read that. Okay, and read stories like Frankenstein and stuff like that. And he wanted to play football, so he had to give me a book report every week for like 12 weeks. He had to give me a book report every week before he played. And
Mhm.
he still remembers that today. In fact, I got him in Theo's class, and he was relaying
Mm.
Theo that what I did,
Mhm.
how come he can read and write so well, is because what I did for him when he was young. Still
Mhm.
remembers that.
Hmm.
Um, I remember the podcaster Dan Carlin in his Common Sense
Hmm.
podcast talked about that because he has a degree of history from the University of Colorado, and he was talking about in one episode about parents involved in the board of education. He said, what was the significance of history? How do you relate the material to whatever the person's interested in? If they're interested, like he said, well, if you're interested, if you're a gearhead, if
Hmm.
you are into cars and everything, you
Hmm.
should at least know the history of it, so you know how everything progressed, how everything came about. That way, you understand why things are the way they are. Especially those who are into the technical aspects of it, or if you're
They
into
got
fashion,
they got a ton
how
of
to
car
relate
magazines.
material.
They had a ton of car magazines. Ton.
Hmm.
In your case,
Yeah,
BGS,
Popular
regarding your nephew,
Mechanics, all of
Popular
that.
Mechanics, all that
yeah,
kind of stuff. There's tons of stuff to
Mm.
read. Go ahead.
yeah. In your case, BGS, when regarding your nephew, did you ever try to get him to read like Sports Illustrated and try to break down articles about certain football players and everything?
No, not
Or like,
really, because that wasn't his forte. So I found out what he liked, and that's what I
okay,
made him read. And so, and once he got into it, it doesn't matter. The thing is that it's reading and that kind of stuff is a muscle, and it's not. It doesn't matter what you read. It's a muscle. You got to exercise it. The more you exercise it, the easier the stuff gets. And so that's what
I
I really wanted.
remember.
That's what I did with my grandson. It was a muscle.
Mhm,
So reading Shakespeare was a muscle, and then the book he had to read for class. Okay, uh,
mhm,
I had him read it. I had it on audio, so he had to listen to it. He had to read it, and then he had to
mhm,
give me a 2 paragraph synopsis of what he just read. And over in about
mhm.
5 weeks, guess what? He went from failing to an A, and his teacher was actually impressed. She said, "This is a lot." So
I
Yeah, you'd be
remember something
shocked
like.
it's a
at
muscle.
that interest factor, man.
Hmm.
Like even it's funny. Like I'm thinking back.
Hmm.
So when I started doing martial arts at 7, the dojo
Mhm,
had a reading program, and it
Hmm.
was interesting because where the dojo was located, the local library was literally right in front of there. So what would happen
mm,
is the more books you read, you'd get medals. And and at the library, if it was known you were reading a certain amount of books, if you were still in elementary school, you could get these little passes for Pizza Hut to get a personal pan pizza.
Hmm.
oh
So,
yeah, good motivation right there.
so I had two different kinds of motivations where I was getting rewarded by reading, the little Goosebumps books and stuff like that. And I'm
Hmm.
7 years old reading Goosebumps. You know what I'm
Yeah, yeah,
saying?
yeah. I was reading
Okay.
I was reading Wizard of Oz when I was 7. So.
Yeah, those
Um.
were it set a precedence.
Hmm.
Mhm. That begs the question. You said you were reading Goosebumps. Did you ever read the Choose Your Own Adventure books as
Yes,
well?
yes. The Dark Wolf series was a real big favorite of mine. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
when I got into middle school, I was big on
Mm-hmm.
those. And so I'd have a little piece of paper. I'd be marking my HP and all of that.
I remember. I don't know. Maybe we probably were in the same age group. You know, I'm probably in the same age group, nameless. But I remember like there was like first of all, my father used to read to me when I was little, and I started picking up reading. If I wasn't, reading a book, sometimes I'd be like watching the screen and just reading the names. Like say I was watching the news program with my parents. They asked me to read out the name that was presented,
Hmm.
and that helped me try to upgrade my reading skills. And then when I started like elementary school, by second or third grade, I started reading all the reading comprehension books that were required. Hang on a second. And then once I got into certain interests, we started expanding, learning new things. Choose Your Own Adventure books was good for me. Not Goosebumps. I was kind of scary ass about it. Wasn't ready for things like that. Yay! I
Wait, that
like what
was
I
the
like.
time period where what was it? Late night TV was like contraband. They had this HBO show,
Oh,
Tales from the Crypt. That's what I'm
oh! I
dating
remember the
myself
animated
now.
series. I remember the animated series of that Tales from the Crypt. But do you also remember something called Where in the World is Carmen San Diego?
Yeah, my schools would
Because
always
remember
make
that
they'd get
introduced
the
it.
little
Yeah, that would
books.
introduce the geography and such.
Well, didn't they?
Also
Yeah,
remember the
they
games as
did.
well.
Yeah, they had the Where's Waldo series was out at the same time as well. That
Mm-hmm.
was my elementary school period.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's
I
nostalgic.
mean, hey, it's funny that they also made animated series about those. Where's Waldo? I never was really. I never was into Where's Waldo, but Where in the World is Carmen San Diego? I remember. But also my love of video games also helped me uh, read more because I had to read the instruction manuals how to play the game right.
Fair. I like playing a lot of RPGs back in the day, so I got more into them when PlayStation came out. So most of
Uh,
those series, you had to get a modded PlayStation to play a lot of the Japanese games. So you had to do a lot of translating oftentimes. So that's kind of how I got started in the Japanese also. So yeah, it was a big deal. If you couldn't find a translation on GameFAQs, it was a wrap.
Is you with that or ask friends for help?
Yeah,
on
I
things?
didn't. Yeah, I didn't know
Playground.
too many. Yeah, all the Japanese people I knew didn't speak English, or they don't speak Japanese, which was hilarious.
No. Well, in my case, I was like, there was a particular game I liked. It was on Super Nintendo, but this was like, but somebody wrote down the like, because I had the instruction booklet in Japanese. I had somebody's just like, but they had their own copy in English. I said, could you just write it down for me? If you can't let me read the book, can you write down the copy? Write it down for me. I said, all right, got that, and that's how I did it, because I couldn't understand Japanese at the time. It's intriguing. Also, the writing systems and whatnot. And again, my case, my parents were hell bent on trying to teach me to read good as well. So that also complicated a lot of things. But the thing is like they were teaching me both Eritrean and Ethiopian goods. There's two forms of it. So I had to understand the code switch on that one.
Nope,
And
I
then
just got
again,
exposed to Ebonics. That was it.
you think you had it rough? Let me say, if you want to talk about reading, you know what further complicated it for me? Because first of all, I grew up in the Middle East. I went to an international school. So I learned under the American system. By the time I turned 12, I relocated back to my native Eritrea. And there they learned the British form of English. So junior high, high school, the English, we had to do everything in English, but it was in the British form of English. And man, was I getting were they reading me the riot act for my spelling and everything, not realizing I was taught the American spelling. So I had to learn the British spelling as well. And in order to comprehend all that, I used to go to like the British Council Library and I'd be reading books that were in British English. And so every once in a while, I find myself like writing certain things, and sometimes I will switch different spellings from time to time. I'll use both of them sometimes. I'll combine them for one reason or another. It gets a little confusing sometimes.
I don't know.
But what you have to do is embed yourself in one system or the other, and then it'll emerge. But if you're constantly switching back and forth, you're gonna mix them. It's natural.
Yeah, it does happen from time to time.
Yeah, like it's funny. I kind of speak Japanese from, I want to word this. I add it to my English, but what happens is you kind of develop a dual personality. Like there's a different personality that animates the words that you're saying, kind of like code switching.
It is.
But it just, it's all added to my English. I view it like an
additional word.
It's like a slang. So
that's the only way you can learn it.
Voice as well.
That's the only way you can learn it. You're adding on to your knowledge base. Okay.
Yeah.
It's an added word. It's not an embedded word. It's an added word.
Yeah, and I started it early enough to where it was still kind of muscle memory in a sense, and I was still around households that spoke it like that, and we were using it in the dojo. So I don't have an accent, but it's not the way I speak Japanese now is the way a lot of people are speaking it over there currently, who've gotten access to social media and what not. Okay. So there's like this bougie hybrid version of Japanese English that's out there now that's actually becoming sort of mainstream. Passport OG knows what I'm talking about, and Theo off probably knows what I'm saying. But it's interesting.
The same thing in Africa, especially in Kenya and Tanzania, right? You have a mix. It's a hybrid version of slang.
Almost like a pigeon, right?
Yeah, it is. It's a mix of everything: English, Swahili, and a little bit of slang. Their slang from their native tongue. It's all mixed together. Yeah, so it's not strict.
Yeah. And you'll flow between English and Japanese just in the same sentence naturally. It's just it makes sense. You get used to hearing it.
And it's funny, like how I hear like my native language spoken by my generation compared to like the older generation, because there are words they borrowed from from Italian due to our colonialism, my generation, we use certain slangs from Arabic as well as English, and we mispronounce some of the words in English as well. So, but for me, I sometimes speak like the old school version of my native tongue, and they're like, "Why do you sound like an old person?" I said, "I was taught." Yeah, some people look at this, dude. You sound like you sound old, man. What's that old? Why you speak that old school stuff? I'm like, I don't know. I was just raised by my grandmother. It was my grandparent. It was my grandparents who taught me my mother tongue, and learning it from my parents' generation. Because I remember like when I started hearing like some of the slang that was used. I was like, what the hell is this? Why are you guys using Arabic terms? We have our own terms.
Hmm.
Even when I talk to people here, they start using words Norwegian, not forgetting that we have our own particular words for certain concepts. It's just like I'm trying to maintain some level of purity, but it's wishful thinking.
Well, you already know your relation. Go ahead.
Also, nameless. One thing you have to consider is like when you start learning new languages, you start developing your own voice as well. Because when
Yeah,
you
that's
speak
what I meant
another
about
language,
different.
it sounds different.
That's what I meant about a different personality.
Yeah.
So with that, there's a different energy that kind of animates the way you say it.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that I can get a greater understanding of someone's language of origin when I hear them speak English, because they'll speak English in the spirit of the previous language they had. And it's really interesting because you'll notice that there's a cadence to other languages. And English has one. It's funny hearing other people describe how they think they hear English. Yeah, go ahead, BGS.
It's a grammar pattern, and I'm doing this with Swahili. So you translate the Swahili into the English word, and what emerges is the pattern of how they form their sentences. Grammar, okay? Because grammar is going to be different. And the thing is, you can't understand the grammar with their words, but the thing is, if you turn it into English words, you can see the grammar pattern. Okay, like some sentences are backwards. Okay, and they place the subject behind the predicate and verb, and when you translate, so okay, I see they just switched this, and this. So you actually start learning the grammar. That's how you learn grammar. Okay, you learn the words first, and then how they place the words, how they place the proper grammar. It's a little bit more difficult. But if you translate it from the original language to English, and you read the English sentence in English, you said, then you notice the pattern, the grammar pattern.
I see that a lot. I mean, like not to mention when you think about, you mentioned this before, BJS, like environment determines the culture of a society, right? And the language is a reflection of the culture. So when you speak a language, you have to, when you speak that language in the cultural context of that particular group. That's why I remember, like, when I was asked to do some translation, I had to choose my words wisely because I had to present things in the cultural context, especially when there are certain proverbs or certain expressions or terminologies that might be alien. I have to find like the usual equivalents or put it in the context they can understand.
Well, usually, most people, just like you, are forgiving if you're a foreigner because they know that your grammar, you're not a native speaker, so your grammar is going to be off. So they accept that. Whereas if you're a native speaker and your grammar's off, they look at you like you're an idiot. Okay.
I have to give, especially when people are trying to converse with me, I have to give them a lot of leeway in
Yes.
certain cases.
Yeah.
Especially,
yeah.
Also considering, like, where I grew up, I was exposed to so many accents. I get used to, hearing people with heavy accents. I've been around South Asians. I hear them even though their accents might be hard for you guys. I understand exactly what they're saying.
Yeah.
And some of the expressions they use. Oh, by the way, nameless. Here's an example of expression.
Go to the American South. Okay. Have you ever heard Glorilla talk?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
I've heard similar. Yes, my dad was around U.S. Servicemen, so I've heard some Southern.
No, you ain't been down south with the country ratchets, man. You ever heard Glorilla talk? And she cleans it up. Okay. You really have to study what they say because it doesn't sound like standard English. Okay. Far from it.
To name his point, like, there's certain expressions that are not used. For example, among my people, they will not say it's don't be it's not it's like, what does it say, instead of saying don't be afraid to try, they will say try is no danger. Okay. Instead of saying "Don't be afraid to try," they just say "Try is no danger."
No,
Try is no danger.
yeah.
Right.
They're translating their native sayings into English. That's all they're doing. Yeah.
Yep.
I know. Just like instead of saying you're tall, they say you're long because the word we use for tall and long is the same
Yeah.
word.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
what?
So they translate their thoughts into English.
Yeah,
And
same
it's
thing in
not always a
Arabic.
one.
I've heard that.
It's not a one-to-one. So you have to.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how come you have to embed yourself, and then see how they express their thoughts because it's going to be different.
Absolutely.
And when most like all like that long and hard, that's it comes from the slang that we've used over time. It's embedded itself into the language.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the
That's
stuff we
interesting.
call English or any kind of language, you started off as slang, cultural slang, and it embeds itself into the language.
I'm gonna watch a
Yeah.
couple of like.
English has a ton of that.
Eng-
Shout out to Rome.
English is a modern English is a mechanical scientific language where they took four languages, pushed them together, and then made a pattern out of it. They made rules
That's-
for them.
I
So
call it a chimera.
yeah, it is. It
Call
is.
it a chimera.
It's not an organic language. But
No.
the thing is, since it's mathematical and since it's
Mhm.
organized, English is actually, basic English is actually very easy. Okay, because the rules are very easy. Whereas, like with Swahili, man, ed and s will change the whole word. Instead of just adding the s or ed in a pattern, it doesn't have a pattern because it's an organic language. So
And you look at its
Yeah.
Bantu cousins, and then you've got other things like clicks added to it all, and
yeah,
it's
Like a
interesting.
koi koi san.
yeah, or yeah, just like the
Koi koi
Chinese tone,
kan.
like the Chinese tones.
hmm
How different
Oh
tones vary.
man.
Yeah.
Oh man. 4
Oh.
different tones, same word, and they matter. Like
Hmm.
you're looking crazy if you don't get the tonality right. So you can't learn that by just
No,
reading.
no,
It's
I
impossible.
it's
remember.
impossible. Yeah.
But the cool thing about Japanese is while there are tones with it all, it's
Mhm.
what makes Japanese difficult is trying to write it.
Mm.
So because it's got so many loan words from the
Mm.
kanji actually make it easier to describe what you're talking about because so
Yeah.
many words are the same thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
because they share the same phonetic sound,
Hmm.
they'll have a different writing to distinguish between the two. So if you can't grasp the context, that's where you got to write it down to know what you mean. You know what I mean?
Tim Ferriss said how he learned how to write Japanese in a short period of time is he took a calligraphy class, okay,
Yeah.
an art class, and he learned how why the strokes mattered and how the strokes are actually put together. And he said he took that for like 6 months, and all of a sudden everything clicked.
It's just like hieroglyphics, actually.
It is. It's an
It's
art, and
yeah,
we
it's
think
just like it.
we English we think it's just writing, just letters, but the thing is, in their writing is an art, and that's what he found out.
Mm.
If you approach their writing from an artistic standpoint, you'll learn it faster. That's what he said.
Yep, I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Hmm.
And that's the cool part about getting into Budo and other martial arts.
Hmm.
It kind of introduces that to you in an intrinsic level because that's how a lot of techniques are transferred as far as the intention behind them all.
Hmm.
So like even this is rife with ninjutsu. So you'll get a particular scroll, and the scroll or the makimono will be organized in such a way that it's supposed to transmit the art that you're studying.
Hmm.
And it'll use archaic terms like a popular one is Tengu no Jutsu. Now, if you just go off of that, you're thinking, are they talking about a crow monster? You know what I mean? Some crow demon technique. Like, how does that make any sense? Well, the technique is actually grabbing somebody by the nostrils. And that is a metaphor for Tengu because Tengu have a characteristics of having really big noses. So it becomes a sub-classification of that. But then there's a behavioral modality tied to that. So if you're talking about Tengu no Jutsu when it comes to espionage, now you're speaking about what to do with someone that has a big ego. So like, there's layers to all of that. And there's a phonetic way you'd say it, but then there's a kanji that's associated with it all. And that's how a lot of those lessons and transmissions went. So unless you know these things, it's essentially impossible to even train in a lot of these things to get a real meaning behind it all. You get this surface level, superficial sort of training, and everyone wonders why it's not really effective. But it's really interesting. The writing is definitely interwoven into the culture, with no pun intended.
Mm.
Yeah, I really want to start going over some of these older manuals because they're fascinating. And I think a lot of the information is extremely useful in the present moment in providing a good format and instruction manual on how to just understand human relations in general on all areas of activity.
All we do is repeat the same pattern in a different environment. That's all we do.
It's so cool seeing how human beings have found so many different ways to come to the same conclusion.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
And what's the variable in that, right? That's why I always go back to Quigley, right, about culture, right? When culture has two components, right, and the resultant is the environment and human beings, right? Okay, how human beings interact with their environment forms your culture. You put them in a different environment, a different culture will emerge.
Which is why it's important people need to consider the environment. And it's a shame that folks will make a judgment. Oh, you're back. Oh, I got this thing minimized. That's why I didn't see you back there, fam. My bad. I got the scroll wheel to let me see who's in the
Ladies
back
and
chat.
gentlemen,
My bad.
welcome the one and only Passport OG.
Man.
What's good, fam?
The thing is that what Z tells me all the time, right? What we talked about is not meant for 99% of the people. So it's very esoteric stuff. Like there's talking about environment and how it changes culture. You know that, Nameless, is that even amongst the people that you propagate with. Okay, this never comes to their brain. They don't even think about it that way. Okay. You know that. I don't have to tell you that. You already know that.
No, I was just expressing a redundant, very clear mood frustration I have. Because
It's called pedestrians and civilians. That's why I named them that way. Okay.
you know, and I'll let OG jump in on that. It's interesting in that there's so many different ways that can over express, because I think for me, my mind looks at things from bigger picture and then reduces to the smallest, lowest common denominator. Then a lot of people begin the opposite way, where their whole understanding of the bigger picture originates from that smaller piece. So they infer what the bigger picture is from this reductionist ideology. And I noticed that people tend to hard select on one or the other. And it's rare to find people who can do both and who can do both dynamically. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay. Nub Glory, I'll answer that one for you. Passport. He may or may not have the answer. Okay. If you look back in history, go back and look at your history about black men and white women. Okay. White women are dangerous to black men. Okay. And have been for a very long, and in some cases still are. Okay. The reason that FBA men are cautious about white women is because the power dynamic is not with you, it's with her. A white woman can have you assassinated just by her tears. Okay. That's why she's dangerous. That's why you have to handle her with a long spoon, with a long handled spoon, right? In fact, there was a white woman who gave birth to a mixed son who's black appearing, right? But he dates white women, so she had to sit his girlfriend down and say, you know what? I know you get upset and how we are, right? But you cannot act out in public if you have a black boyfriend because you will put him in danger. So you have to take that at home and do that in private. Okay, because I know you want to act up normally like you would a white guy, but you're not with a white guy. That's why. Okay, it's not that deep. In fact, I just played that thing about the civil rights movement, right? When in 63, 64 with forget the name of the group. Okay,
That Margaret, yeah,
yeah.
that suffrage feminist organization. Yeah, this is the power dynamic they were concerned about.
In other words, you're down here, you mix with black men that you've never been around, and you want to date them in public, but guess what? You can't do it in public because you can put the lives of those men in danger. I had to tell them that. It was in 63. Okay, with the student Snick. It was Snick. Okay. They had to tell them, and the white woman getting upset. Said, "No, you will put," and they had to find out. Fuck around and find out. Had to find out that they put
The
that
hard way.
boy's life in danger by being out with him. Okay, and even
Mhm.
though it has evolved where it's not as bad, um, I still hear about boys getting thrown on cars by police and roughed up by police because they have a white woman in the car. Okay, go back and look at what is it? Not Get Out. Is it Get Out? I think it was Get Out, right? Okay.
The
When
Yeah.
movie
she,
Get Out, yeah.
yeah, when she had to get that cup off of him. Okay, he was in the passenger seat. She was driving, but he was harassing him because he's in the seat. Okay, so
I
that's why
guess.
FBA men do not
Mhm,
are very cautious about dating white women.
mhm.
Okay, it should be
Um,
obvious. Go ahead.
yeah. I think. Do you remember the movie Devil in the Blue Dress with
Yes,
Denzel Washington?
yes,
There was that one scene. I forgot the woman who played the so-called white woman who was actually
yeah,
passing for white.
yeah.
She was like, "I hope you're not scared." He's like, "What? Scared?" And he's thinking out loud, scared, as the narrator says, "Scared." First of all, I'm driving a white car in a white neighborhood with a white woman in the back seat. I wasn't scared. I was stupid.
Yeah, he's stupid. Yeah, he's terrified. Yeah, he
He
should
was
have been.
stupid.
Yeah,
Second, another one I can
in
think
his
of.
60s. Yeah,
Mhm. Another example I can think of is if you remember in the Malcolm X movie with
yeah.
Denzel, there was that one scene where he and some of the associates from the NOI were walking to a certain lecture hall building where there was a lecture hall, and a
Hmm.
white co-ed came up to them, and she looked like a beatnik and asked him, "What can I do to help you with your organization?" He just looked at her and said, "Nothing,"
Nothing. Yeah,
Nothing.
nothing. Yeah,
and walked away.
yeah.
But let me get past Port OG, and he came up. I want to make sure he gets his
Mhm.
opening mail.
Hey man, y'all. Hey, what's going on? Y'all cooking, man? Hey, keep going. Keep going.
I don't know. No glory. I have no idea what country you're from. Okay, but you have to be here to know it. Okay, if you're not from here, then you wouldn't know the danger that white women put you in. Okay,
You
there's a
know
reason. There's a
that
reason they call white women Karens here. Okay.
that show Blackish has an infamous scene with that
With the
little white
elevator.
girl in the elevator.
Oh, with a little white girl in the elevator, the little white baby in the
I,
elevator. Yeah,
I
Little white
think
baby
that
in the elevator, yeah.
that
it explains
explains everything.
everything. It does in a nutshell.
Like you don't even
I,
it really isn't that deep. Yeah, go ahead, fam.
I remember my dad showed me the learning tree, and I watched that, and I was like, "Oh no, I'm not dating white women ever."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just
I mean, basically, all you have to do is go back and read the story of Emmett Till, or go watch Till.
Yeah.
If that does it, and that was in '55, okay, before, just 10 years before civil rights. Okay.
Well, the point is ultimately you just got to be aware that there is an imbalance of the power dynamic, and while
Yes.
that exists with women in general, because black men are in that out group classification,
Yeah.
you still have to be able to navigate that. Which
Mhm.
again is why when you're in your vetting process, overall, we tend to just work with people who are willing to work with us, especially now, even though generally speaking, we still overwhelmingly hard select on black women.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think I think that's even less of a thing now. Like these things are already openly understood in general across the board.
I've had my own experiences of that, especially up here in Europe.
Okay.
Even though, and I've had to be very cautious in certain cases. I remember I mentioned a couple of times a couple of relationships I was involved in.
Hmm.
The first one I involved in, it got pretty serious, but something in my gut told me don't pursue it.
Hmm.
When she asked me certain questions, I was like, she wanted to especially when I mentioned that she wanted to have a child with me, but I didn't think in my heart it was a good idea during the circumstances I was in, especially when I knew in the back of my mind the words deportation was a good motivation for me to keep myself in check and not get out of control and not do anything stupid. I'm very cautious because I understood there was like certain people, because I was well aware that people were giving me, I would get dirty looks and whatnot. If it
Well,
wasn't from locals, and if it wasn't from locals, it was probably from other groups. I remember an associate of mine.
Hmm.
He was with a local woman, and he noticed
Hmm.
uh, a black couple was looking at him.
Hmm.
Now they were Somali, first of all. Now most people are mistaking all of us for Somali, so he didn't get upset about it. All he did was he went up, approached them, and when he greeted them, and they were like, and they realized he was not one of their ilk, they just like, yay. Then it's just that disarmed them completely, and they were very apologetic about it.
Yeah.
He understood the dangers he was looking at because
it,
you get from both sides.
Name it ain't the same. Okay, that's all I can tell you.
That's
It
true,
ain't the same.
and that's true.
It ain't the same. Okay, that's all I can tell you. It ain't the same.
This is one of the reasons why, for a lot of guys, like putting them on child support or just putting them in the system is an absolute deal breaker. It's a deal breaker. Like if you're going to involve the government in a black relationship, then you got to go. Like
you got to go. Yeah, basically you put your creditor instead of a mate. Yeah.
And you can see a lot of the problems that happen with a lot of white mothers that have mixed children. They're very hyper cognizant of a lot of that. Like even if they pass the family test where the family accepts them, they'll really be vocal about a lot of the problems they end up noticing in school. And that's when you'll get white women that they make it clear that dynamic is a thing, and they end up having to put a lot of effort into it. Like it's still a thing. It's still a thing, but what do you do? This is where we're at with a post 1964 sort of society. And I don't know how. Maybe we're just more aware of it now. I don't know. Like the risk is across the board. It's just a different flavor of bullshit you got to deal with.
The propaganda is that things have changed, right?
Right.
Okay. Things have not changed that much. Okay.
No.
It's a long time for culture to change like that.
Yeah. The good thing is, again, you got a passport, and now that you know what's going on, there's tools you can use to insulate. But yeah, the end result is still going to be what the data shows, which is we overwhelmingly choose black women in general, but across the board relationships are just falling through the floor. But we're back to the bigger reason for that is the environment. And shout out to the Industrial Revolution and Fourth Industrial Revolution. It's going to be interesting to see how that dumpster fire continues. But they're trying.
When it get to the bio part of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, then it's going to go light speed. Because that hasn't really happened yet.
Not yet, and the signs are starting to show, man. It's starting to show.
The tools are ready, and basically, I think this Medicare thing is going to accelerate the bio part.
Oh yeah, and AI is getting smart enough to augment that. Augmented reality is what I think they're waiting for. I'm eyeballing the video game industry right now and seeing when they want to start rolling out a lot of this augmented reality technology and jump to the next stage when it comes to graphics and virtual reality interfaces. Like once we start getting there and that becomes more of a part of people's everyday life, I think that's when it just becomes expected and exponential, because there's already a conversation about improving humans' cognitive capacity with regards to expanding the brain's computational power with fourth industrial augmentation, aka the chip. You know what I'm saying? And connecting with various interfaces.
The thing is, the last time you had an industrial revolution, the big one, right? The first one, right? Yeah, a lot of people died. Okay, whenever every see babies, one out of every third baby was sent to die. Okay, because they were not needed. So you're gonna have a lot of human capital that will actually fall out and fall to the wayside. Okay, are you ready for that? And they may not be.
I don't think people know what that even looks like, fam.
Nobody they didn't know what it looked like the first time it happened until it happened.
But you know what I think is going to mute a lot of that this time, unlike last time? They've got these self-deletion pods and self-deletion methodologies that are really being pushed. I know that for now, the big push is if you've got some sort of medical issue going on, they want to make it available for you to get access to that. I know Canada's big on that, but I look at certain parts of Europe and, those self-deletion pods are getting huge as far as popularity is concerned.
They're meant for the older folks that don't want to suffer, can't afford to the upkeep. Okay. They were not meant for the younger population. What happens when it goes down to the regular people on the street?
And that's what they're noticing with the data. More and more people are choosing it, and the ages are getting a lot younger, and it's getting real eugenic-like.
Like you mean young people are choosing to delete themselves, suicide? So
let me explain. Let me explain before it gets out of context. for now, let's say you've got a child that's special needs, and the government is going to have to facilitate by way of public assistance, Medicaid, Medicare, all these other things. The insurance companies are kind of nudging parents to be like, well, we'll offer you this credit if you make the consideration. And they're the green lighting situations where they could have done the surgery, or they could have given you a procedure, or maybe a chronic long-term thing. They'll classify it as, we're going to ease that person's suffering by letting them choose this euthanization option.
Where it's cheaper, instead of keeping you alive for the 5-10 years.
Right. That's the gray area that's being flirted with, because if you don't monitor that, eventually mental illness ends up being one of the main qualifiers for that. So as of now, people who have mental illness now, they're supposed to be kept out of that. But depending on how certain things get classified, you understand what I'm saying? Like it's getting real gray area-ish now that profit margins are being considered, and you see what's happening with a lot of these insurance companies. They don't want to pay for nothing. So it's the easy solution.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the self-deletion regarding mental illness and whatnot, because people forget that certain disorders do have some of the highest rates of self-deletion, or at least attempts to.
Shout out to schizophrenia.
Bipolar. What I suffer from, it's 1 in 10 actually. Borderline personality disorder. It's 1 in 10, but they have we're more likely to battle ideation of it. Thankfully for me, my OCD keeps me away from that. But there are times where I've had to do something to stop myself from trying to delete myself. I've almost had a couple of episodes in recent years. The only thing was an anxiety attack that saved me, and calling somebody to help me, talk me off the ledge. But to offer that also brings up another interesting thing. Like we talk about genetic screening of fetuses as well.
That is such a great area now. You're right. I didn't want to jump into that, but as they get into things like gene editing now, and I think they're at the Cas freaking 20 something now, like it's really sophisticated. They're looking at working on new therapies that can intervene with that in the fetus stage and then post birth. And again, I don't know how you get out of the eugenics sphere. Like that's exactly what that is now.
That's pod babies. I'm saying it's like the Matrix.
Well, wait 1 second. I just someone sent a cash app. Shout out to Scott D for sending the cash app on that. It was $7. I appreciate you, fam.
Thank you.
But go ahead, fam.
But what I wanted to say was, first of all, regarding that, I mean, you already got people doing genetic screens regarding, as adults, that is, genetic screening for preconditions, especially when you're worried about certain diseases that are certain forms of cancer, or other diseases that are
hereditary,
hereditary, or whatnot. There's also a genetic component with certain mental disorders, and some people do not practice. And there are people I know who have mental disorders and they have children. But what they're able to do is they keep a very vigilant eye on their children, hoping that they don't pass on their disorder to them. But when they do, at least they'll be able to see it early and then prepare the child with the skills needed to keep that in check, so that doesn't affect them severely. But it depends on the disorder in question. Some are, especially how the level of volatility in some of these disorders.
I'm curious what a shift in that ideology would do to humanity, because some of the greatest achievements of mankind were achieved by people that were
crazy. We're crazy.
So, well, not crazy. No. Just they had disorders. They were something was mentally wrong, something was emotionally wrong. Their body was deformed, and they overcame it. So what happens if you just screen out, or better yet, what happens if the person who lost their job gives up on life? And in previous, I mean, there have been people that have done really good things and bad things. What happens if that person just says, "Let me go get one of those pies"?
Your advancement would be delayed. It won't. The idea will come back. It just won't happen as fast as it possibly could.
Prime example I could give of somebody who was like, who's claimed to have had illness was like Vincent van Gogh, or Vincent van Gogh, as pronounced in Dutch. But however, this also includes, but we have to also factor in people who are on the spectrum. Sir Isaac Newton was supposedly is believed to have had the telltale signs of Asperger.
Yeah, well, you know what Asperger's was back then.
And plus, it's a trip to the priest.
Yeah, that's probably true. And plus, he was a royal. He wasn't just a normal person. Okay.
Was he?
Yes.
That I did not know.
Sir Isaac Newton. Come on, man.
Yeah, man. They're all that whole Benjamin Franklin line, man. But what's interesting is the onset of autism. I highly suspect that, number one, there's way more people on the spectrum, and this being on the spectrum is about to be the new thing. Like it's going to be compatible with the fourth industrial revolution in a way where it would shock you.
Guess who's has been paying for this Asperger's and hiring all these people? Okay, like who do you think those kids working for Dojo are?
Oh yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like that's about to be the new normal.
And guess what? It was Bill Gates and it was what's his name? Steve Jobs actually financed that in Silicon Valley.
It's surprising how few people miss that, or how many people miss that point, that shift.
Well, they wouldn't. You won't know about it if you're not part of the tech community. It was obvious back then because they actually advertised it back in the 90s. Okay, they were actually looking in financing these people to go to school and stuff like that.
Yep. Yeah. Like I remember being in the gifted program. And there was a lot of people who, I guess, being gifted and being on the spectrum, they rhyme with each other. They've got a lot of overlap, and you're just seeing that happen at a greater frequency at this point now. And it's interesting because unless it affects your social capacity, you usually don't even notice it. But the key characteristic is the ability to focus. And the technology is just making it very convenient to have people who are able to do that. And even with the weapons platforms that are being introduced now with drones and whatnot, like parts of society that you would think would have been completely skipped over, like professional video game people. Professional gamers are getting eyeballed by the military industrial complex like crazy.
Who are the people building these systems? Who do you think they are?
Oh yeah, man! Shout out to Halliburton and all of them. All of them.
Those people that we talk about, they're building systems according to who they are, right? Who are they?
Yep. Yeah, same crew, same people.
Crew. So yeah,
same people.
When they design,
right there.
Yeah, they're going to design it for people like them.
Yep. And
have you guys ever seen the Korean kids play StarCraft, like competitive, like computer gaming? How quickly they multitask? Like that is a unique skill that, I mean, it might help to be on the spectrum. If you can make, I mean, some of these kids are making like 150 keystrokes a minute, like clicks and keystrokes a minute. Like that's not normal. That's the new normal.
It might be, but what's the downside of having people like this?
Oh, well, yeah.
And that's the catch in the long run. I mean, you're going to be surprised how many people are just going to opt out of real life and just co-sign on augmented reality the way you see people doing on social media in general.
Okay. Yeah. And so if they're doing that, what's the fallout?
It's less of a fallout and probably a new definition of normal. Because people are adjusting, and I think it depends on how fast that happens. But it's going to be interesting to see how Generation Alpha and Beta respond to that, because they're really going to be the ones that kind of have to listen to millennials and zillennials, make all these warnings, because for them, this is normal.
Yeah, that's true. But the thing is, That's something that what Jobs found out. Um, if they study human patterns and they design technology to work with the pattern that's already there. That's how come a 5-year-old and 85-year-old can actually use the same iPad.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah, television model.
No. Basically, that's how come things like TikTok and YouTube work. Okay, the videos work, right? It's not because they done something new. What they did is rebrand old shit. Okay,
That's what
basically.
I mean by the television model.
No,
So
no. Listen to me for a second, okay?
yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. What is the first form of communication?
Generally speaking, touch or
That
sound.
sound, right? Voice,
Yeah,
right? How do you
yeah.
relay information from one person to the next, right? The old griot, the storyteller, right?
Mm.
It held your history,
Yes, the
right?
griot.
Okay, so all you did was take the griot and put him on YouTube, or take the griot, put him on TikTok. Okay, the highest form of learning, most difficult form of learning is what? Symbolic, which is reading. Okay,
Right. So the storytelling is the ultimate form of communication transfer. No, oh yeah, I'm with
it,
you. But
it's
I was saying the television was
it's
doing that, but it's the radio, I guess, to do an
it's the
extension of
old.
that.
So what all you're doing is doing what? Taking the old form and put it into a new environment, a new technology. That's all you're doing.
New
Yep.
medium.
That's why it works so
Yeah.
A
well.
new medium.
Yeah, I agree. So what I mean though is there's some additional modalities that are now being stacked on top of that. So I'll give you an example of
Okay.
why I isolated alpha and beta.
Okay.
The iPad children.
Mm-hmm.
So the key thing is, and this is why I said touch, maybe this is debatable, right? But if I think there's neurological differences between children who grow up before the internet and having immediate interaction with technology
Mm-hmm.
when they're still neurologically forming versus these kids that are not even 2 years old and they can navigate the touchpad to get to programs and apps that they want to see.
Mm-hmm.
You understand what I'm saying? I don't know if it ends up being a this and or it becomes a this or. So when we talked
Either
about the
or.
potential downsides, what they're introducing is an intermediary between two people in communication.
Okay.
So
You already seeing it with the Generation Z going to the workforce.
I agree. And what I mean is that was them having a hybrid upbringing similar to younger millennials. So what I'm saying is with generation alpha and beta,
Mm-hmm.
they got that out the gate. That's what I want to
And
see happens as they go into adolescence and
I
get older.
I got I got grandchildren that are alphas. Okay.
Right.
And the thing is, why do you think you have to dumb down the curriculum?
Facts. So that's what I mean about the regression. Like the technology gets more advanced, but the people
What you're doing is regressing people back to their native state by doing this. Okay. People have been, even though it's a bit network and you have more to see and more to do, blah blah blah. Guess what you're doing? You're not really reading. You're not, which is the highest form of knowledge transfer that we come up with so far. Okay, you go regressing back to the original form of transfer, which is voice, and maybe pictures, right? Because what did Griot do? He get up and he act it out, and he vocalized it, right? What you see on YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube and TikTok, right?
And
indeed.
vocalize and
Vocalize it
demonstrate.
and demonstrate.
Yep. And marketers really learn to master that so they could get their point across and elicit a response so that you'd want to purchase something. And with
Hmm.
these algorithms, paying attention to a lot of your biographical data that it can get now, it's hyper calibrating it.
Yeah, it basically it's down to the finest detail because you have what it's doing is collecting such a big database of people and can
Mhm.
start segmenting people because it's one thing if you got like most studies have what a few thousand people. Okay,
Oh man, yeah.
What happens when
Several million.
what happens
Billions.
when you have billions of people
And then you've got years of interaction history.
interaction? Yeah,
It starts actually predicting what you're going to do.
down to the finest detail, and along with neurological studies and stuff like that, down to the finest.
Oh man.
Yeah.
That's the whole big data thing. And that, again, that's another fourth industrial revolutionary point that has gone over people's heads that is just, it's insane. the type of data they're able to extrapolate and figure out.
They basically, even the people collecting it don't know exactly what to do with it because it's too much.
Man, they're at a point now where they can tell by your search history and what you buy that the algorithm is so sophisticated now that it's able to start making predictions as to whether or not women are pregnant sometimes.
No, if you have, I mean, if you have enough data points and enough examples as a human being, you can do the same thing. Okay, if you have enough data points, okay, you can tell. If a human being can tell with a small subset of people, guess what an algorithm can do with billions of people?
It becomes a legit oracle.
All it is a database. Okay, I got this is maybe 20 points. Okay. Throw it into the database and see what comes out. You're going to come out with a segment of people, okay? And then you refine that from there down to the point where you almost know the person, okay? By culture, by language, by search history, blah, 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 even down to the point where they live.
Yeah, man. Some of these algorithms can even tell you're African American by just certain things you're choosing and looking at without having to say anything.
Of course. So if a human being can do it, the algorithm can too.
Excuse me, Name.
If you think about a database, it's not that hard.
Yeah, I think the comment here highlights exactly what I was talking, and that's what they're being used for that, so they can start advertising stuff. It's hilarious, man.
Yeah.
But a neighbor out there, were you gonna say something? Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, first of all, I gotta give props to Monset Noir for his name. That's very kick-ass. Billy Flench, Monset Noir. Like you said, they've been screening for people without autism because they're looking for people like this with certain situations. You asked what the trade-offs were. I remember a certain similar thing. They said they were looking in the case of major corporations. They were trying to recruit people who had the telltale signs of ASPD, aka antisocial personality disorder. You guys know what that is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, sociopathy, psychopathy, and whatnot. But and what do you think of the trade-off of that? Sometimes they don't consider the trade-offs. They just look at the
you're a cog in a freaking wheel, man. Just like anything else, okay? And that's the way they're treating you now. But they're gonna put you where you're most effective for the task at hand.
That's the theme going forward, man. Hyper specialization.
Yeah,
it really is. Hyper specialization and being able to operate in a world where your baseline defaults are already accounted for through either automation, AI, or entry-level fourth industrial technologies. The good news is that does free you to come up with higher level executive expressions of these things. But if you're not starting that from the beginning and you're trying to live life on autopilot, man, it's going to be, I won't say it's rough, but
80% of people live their life on what? Autopilot.
Man, it's going to be, but you know what? I guess for some people, it's comfortable for them to have a slave hut with Wi-Fi and AC. You know what I'm saying? They've got access to Amazon. They're comfortable that way. I guess that's the majority of people. I'm not going to judge that, but man, it's crazy looking at what the other end of that spectrum looks like with all of this freaking creative potential. The other side of that is insane.
Can the potential that you exhibit be used in a manner that will enhance whatever the needs of society or that particular industry?
BGS, they're muting you.
Are they?
Say
yeah, you're going in and out. You're going in and out. In and out.
So you have to. Most people want to. Okay, that's why you have to get rid of morals. Okay, especially when you're looking at this. Okay, what's your specialty and where would you be best put, and that will tell you exactly where they're going to put you. What the aim is. Okay, you don't put a pacifist in the middle of a war.
No.
Oh hell no.
Because that's not what you need him for.
Nope. Put him in the logistics. Watch the magic happen.
Watch the magic happen. Yeah.
You don't want to put a pyromaniac as a forest ranger, for that matter.
You do not. That's the whole thing. Every personality, God, the universe creates people for specific needs. Okay, there's no unwanted people. The thing is, can you match the need with that personality, and that's the difficult part.
That's exactly what a hive does, believe it or not.
Yes, it does. or a small tribe, right?
Yeah.
You're born in a
Yeah.
small tribe. They figure
Yeah.
out what you do best, and they assign that task to you.
Not only that, man, they've already got you astrologically figured out before you get there. So your whole line of training is generally set up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they got a good idea. What's that whole meme? During births, the old school phrasing is, who's returned.
Yes.
So
return of an old spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man. There's
like
something to that
concept of reincarnation. Some people are destined to become or they talk about destiny. Or certain people are destined to become this, that, and the third. Like a person could be destined to become a healer. If they try to go against that, they may end up, having their lives destroyed in the process by the spirits.
A sociopath would be a CEO. Psychopaths would not. Psychopaths are destructive.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and see, that's the whole thing that in commoditization and industrialization and doing all of this in isolation to have people fit one mold, it soft selects for psychopathy, and that's where you run into. You don't want a bunch of people being sociopaths in your society.
No,
if it's democratic, you just don't want that, and that's the trend, and that's the key to the point that you're mentioning here, BGS man. Like AI probably is going to be really good at identifying that and slotting people for what they're kind of best at.
Yeah,
and that's how societies have generally been successful. But I wish people would take that a little bit more serious, man, because there's no such thing as greater than, lesser than. There's just best at. And that's the strength of humanity, quite frankly, in my subjective opinion. The fact that there's so many ways that you can get a stable human being and it functions and they're not exactly the same. So if you aggregate us all together, our capacity to understand the bigger picture is profound. But the key to that is communicating and not getting the idea that one perspective is better than the other. It's just different. Being able to mobilize it to a goal.
The things with this many people that you see a lot of replication similarities. So you don't need exactly one person, okay? Because that person is similar enough to another group of people. That's why they put people in groups that are similar.
Mboto Mpangi fam, I didn't see you in my freaking browser is just hiding y'all. So if you've been sitting there and I didn't see you, that's why, man. My fault. Mbote.
Mpangi. No, I just arrived. I just came in the back because of the comment you highlighted, and to go in line actually with both the hive and the specialization of societies. Many years ago, when I was discussing with my friends in the craft, I was telling them that in line with what we're seeing, nameless, with the cybernetic universe attempting to replicate what was in the mystery systems, but in a more material way. Normally, in a proper initiative society, you are able to determine what is the purpose of each individual which is born, which is referred to as each one's logos, one's personal legend. You're able to draft the line mathematically with the numbers. That's what they say. Numbers are the lot of the universe, but they're also the verb of the divine. Each one has a chart which is referred to as the legba, the so-called serpent, snake. It is the whole constellation. You are able to determine precisely what is your purpose in this existence, why you were born, who you're supposed to associate with, your enemies, your falling points, everything in a mathematical charts to very, very precisely. And in this way, if you're able to chart each individual that is born, you can organize a society in accordance to the mission for which individual is present on Earth. But in the material ways that this AI society is doing, they're able to determine maybe they might be able to impose a purpose of each individual and lock them in the ways that the architects of a new society would determine it to be. In such societies, you might be locked, maybe imprisoned into the predetermined roles that the architects would have specialized for you, which may be actually different than what you were actually specialized to be by the source of all things. Which is why it might be more advantageous to go to the most ancient ways rather than specialize it through maybe an AI. But it might be that the AI might determine the specialization is more in accordance with the proper oracle. But who are the ones who are devising the AI? That is the question.
And that's why, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Gilgami, I infer that for, especially when we get into the shadows of Babylon, those people who came out of Babylon to the continent and helped establish a lot of these patterns, I see matriarchal sphere, patriarchal sphere, balancing each other out, ruled by a circle of elders and an elected chief. And it's the children that are constantly being reunited first with the circle of elders that determine that, so that those that are in the peripheral of that organization can get their proper assignment and designation and in the proper training so that they can support the general goal of the tribe. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. For example, let's say that in the lower phase of incarnation, you were born to a specific sign, maybe those of the Scorpio sign, of the Taurus sign. They are supposed to be, at least in the Congo tradition, and the Congo tradition shed light on what was said maybe in the Bibles. They are supposed to be a caste of, let's say, trainers, teachers who are specialized in the path of the Scorpio, in which you begin the path of the Scorpio and gradually you're supposed to evolve into the other phases. That we, if for someone initiating the Congo tradition, would say that's what it means about the so-called 12 tribes. Not necessarily that there are 12 people, 12 sons, but there are actually 12 incarnations. You are incarnated, at least in the zodiacal level, into a specific sign, and then gradually you're supposed to know thyself to that phase, and then learn gradually about the other signs which also lie within you, even
That's
if you have a
exactly how
specific
martial arts works. Yep,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
exactly how martial arts works.
But basically, the mathematical stuff is basically over 100,000 years. They form a database, okay, just like that's like AI does, okay. And so, if you by the position of planets, there's certain energies that hit you when you're conceived, and if you do that long enough, patterns start to show up.
And shout out to gravitational waves, which validates that point, because you got some folks that want to try to dunk on that, but gravitational waves demonstrated that's a thing.
And what people try to dunk on it, but the thing is, that's like you can't listen to pedestrians, okay?
No, it's not meant actually. If you listen to the most, well, if you're in contact with those societies, you will come to something that tends to be almost invariable. The high chiefs of orders, they all tend to be mathematicians. They will all tell you, no, the
but they're drawn on they're drawn on a database that goes back 100,000 years, because these patterns show up. Okay, so that when they go look at you and they go look at your chart, they're comparing it against a pattern that maybe go back 10, 20, 30,000 years. Okay, so according to this pattern that we've seen over the past 30,000 years, this kid being born at this time, this particular hour, with these positions of planets should act like this. Okay,
right.
That's where the math comes in.
And what's interesting to see is because society has streamlined in this commoditized modality, starting with the industrialization period, particularly, the 1890s going forward. I mean, it's punished people for having anything that digresses from a very specific kind of model.
Really like the slave farms and
man,
that's where it comes from.
So it's crazy, man. Like, the big obvious point is a lack of posturing for those that should be getting their initiatory training. And for lack of a better term, I'm gonna say shamanism. But those who are trained to look downstream, there's no role for people like this anymore. So if you're born like this, and you should be getting a completely different type of socialization. If you don't get forced into the standardized classroom, you get labeled with having some sort of learning disorder or, some kind of attention deficit situation going on. You know what I'm saying? It's unfortunate because that whole section's not being utilized by the culture now.
Because you're a cog, you're a machine supposed to fit into a part, okay? That you fit into a system, okay? That's what the bigger the system, the more you're going to get lost because there has to be a place for you to fit in a smaller group, a smaller tribe, okay? Every person in the tribe counts, okay? That's the whole thing about a small tribe. Every kid that survives and born counts. You got the person has to be useful for something for the tribe to survive, right? When you this big conglomerate of people where people are actually expendable, then there's a different choice. Okay, there's a different outcome. Okay?
They gotta be useful to the group. Useful.
Yeah, and useful to where the society says that you're useful. If you don't fit into a slot in the society, okay, especially if you have enough people and not enough redundancy, you're going to get cast aside, just like any other machine culture.
And so the first folks to get cut typically got a Y chromosome, and I think that's the unfortunate part. People kind of aren't really giving enough credit to.
Because Y chromosomes don't produce what? Babies.
Eggs.
Yeah.
They're talking about that right now with the antenatal shit. Okay. What happens if you don't produce enough children? If women don't play their role, what happens to your society? It dies.
And that's a big, that's we got to do the follow up on that, BGS. So I'm about ready to have that follow up so we can dead that conversation about folks really not giving enough credit to what's really pushing these executive decisions and interventions. I'm not even going to get into whether or not it was planned or not, but people have not made the correlation of fertility, and the bottom line is there's just not enough people.
I mean, the thing is, just like anything else, right? Your model of society, your model of finance is constructed on an ongoing model, right? And when something disrupts that model, guess what happens to the model?
Man, it starts catastrophically collapsing.
It implodes. That's what Swackers. Why are you saying Trump and Doge are doing what they're doing, right? Because the model that you were using for the past 70 years is collapsing.
Yeah, man. And that old order is just really revealing how it used a lot of the federal government just as it's a freaking money laundering scheme, essentially. So if you're going to change the model to something else, you got to go to this whole, North American Union style self-autonomous sort of thing. It's not going to look like the way you used to seeing business done the last 70 years.
I mean, what are your options? Basically, just like anything else. Okay?
They don't have none, and that's the point.
You've been in the military, right? Your military is environment first, right? What ground are we fighting? Is it water? Is it swamp? Is it desert? Is it in the city? And now we have the environment. Okay, now what are our options? Okay, in other words, when the environment shifts, you got to change your plan, right? So
we're on desperate ground right now, and the important part about desperate ground is that when you run out of options on desperate ground, you don't have any other option but to fight. And I think that's the problem people are running into. Where
fight or negotiate.
Well, but the problem is the negotiation is a feint because they're still on desperate ground. So what's happening is people are buying into the false opening and they're walking into a kill zone. And that's how you defeat people on desperate ground. You never fully surround your opponent. You always leave them a way out. And as they begin to take it, they don't engage with you 100%. And that's the whole concept of being on deadly ground. Well, specifically being on desperate ground that converts into deadly ground. They have figured out, or the action now is the decision to fight. And that's fighting on every economic level to gain that independence to preserve itself.
If you don't leave your opponent, and that's what the Chinese are.
Yep.
Sun Tzu said you got to leave your enemy an avenue to escape. Unless you want to, for it costs you more lives just to fight the person because they're desperate. Then Okay, it's going to cost you more.
Especially like in a siege or something like that.
That's
Or
exactly what we're talking
withdrawal.
about. So,
Yeah.
so people aren't understanding that we are actually on desperate ground.
Yes.
It's like people who don't understand quicksand.
Yeah.
Like if you don't understand quicksand and you've got both feet in about 6 inches deep into the quicksand,
Yeah.
you don't realize how bad things are about to get as you stand there with this
Unless-
heavy pack surrounded by a bunch of other people who are also in the quicksand.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You need to secure a rope or something to get you out of there ASAP. And if you got people like, man, I'm good, you know, okay. That's the fertility reproductive issue going on now. It is creating desperate ground all over the industrial first world, and they are completely clueless, the average person, to this.
Yeah. That's part of the problem with not informing your populace. And let them make the decision, because they might say, okay, I'm willing to let the society die. I think a lot of you women are. They're willing to let it die.
Shout out to 4B, right? But that's them. There's a lot of people that want to move forward, and their argument is, well, it's too expensive.
You have it here about with abortion, right? Abortion rights and antenatal and childless female. Okay, they don't care.
Yeah, the child free movement. That
they don't care. I'm going to survive just fine until my old age without children, and that's the way they see it until they don't. Okay.
Well, one thing that shocks me is looking at everything that's happening. I mean, would you not keep that to yourself, or at least tone it down? I mean, you can't read the room. Like these chicks are getting even louder. What do you do with? I don't know.
If a society decides to commit suicide, what do you do?
I mean, again, this is another shout out to Dr. John Calhoun's work. Like this is just par for the freaking course. The frustrating part is we can intervene and stop this, but the bottom line ends up being, if a woman doesn't want to have a child and she's got an option to abort, she's gonna do it.
The only way you can intervene with this is change the environment of the creatures that are inside it. If Calhoun at a certain point just released these mice back into the wild, they would revert.
They would, and that was the key. There was nowhere to go. So if you can provide more options, which ultimately is what I see the overall strategy is with what the current administration is doing. They have made, especially Elon's big on this. He was the main one I ever heard in the mainstream media willing to talk about the situation in Japan, for example, and then link that to the global fertility rate. But then all people could do was extrapolate some sort of eugenics agenda behind that, failing to realize that, this is an actual big thing. There's not enough people to pay the taxes. As it stands, you need people and human capital to support your state. No people, no state. It's that simple. And people have not drawn that simple line that, and I guess maybe this was the shift in culture. It used to be seen that having children was considered a civic duty. So what's gone on with this idea of civic duty? It seems to have gone out the window in the 60s.
I mean, when you separate culture from need, then it's going to eventually erode over time. That's what it's done. It's eroded. Okay, I don't need it. Okay, in agrarian society, you need as many kids as possible.
Yep.
What happens when you don't need them?
Yep. And so these changes are happening faster than the technology that's available to actually offset a lot of that stuff. Like I think this works in a category 1 on the Kardashev scale, but we're not anywhere near there yet. We're approaching it. We just don't have the technology to offset all of this yet. And so I think that's the issue. If we had another 100 years to go like normal and really bring this technology out, then I could see that.
It's there. It's just the moral reasons they won't produce it. It's there.
I get it. I'm just mean it's not the standard SOP operating procedure everywhere yet. I'm not talking about our capacity. I mean, it's not rolled out. We're doing it now yet.
The thing is, it won't be done by us. It'll be done by the state.
Right. It's for a myriad of reasons they've elected for. We're not at that Kardashev one yet. Part of it is it's that tug of war between profit getting in the way of progress. For a lot of things, man.
And there's still too many people that will rebel against the idea.
Yep. and then the social acceptance piece, because
Yeah.
you still got folks that think aging, for example, they some think of it as a disease that can be cured, and other folks look at it as something that natural thing that should just happen.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's what. So where have we heard this before?
right,
Mm.
right, yeah, we know what happens to that.
The human nature does not change. Okay.
It really does.
Yeah, that's when you look at it, it's just you shake your head. I'm looking. That's why when I look at world events right now, it's just okay. Given the environment, what would a human being do? And 9 times out of 10, it's correct. Okay. You see them make a move. Okay, I know what you're doing. Okay.
Yep.
And I know. Now you're getting desperate. Now you're working on hope now, because it's you fucked up. Okay. And I'm willing to say that you're wrong. You know you fucked up. You don't want to really. Actually, just like Zelensky. Okay. I don't want to be wrong. I'm hoping that by some means I can pull through this. Okay.
This guy, man. We talked about that earlier.
Mm.
Yeah, man. He.
Yeah, with the elephant in the room, and I'm not sure if I should put this here on your channel, is white supremacy does not want to die. That's
No, it's in the way now, and I think he figured that out when they talked to Trump. And I think they're going to be very surprised to see the non-traditional, non-congruent angles that administration takes against that.
If you listen to him, and I just heard Jeffrey Sachs say it. Okay, he was actually giving a speech to I forget to whom, right? Okay, you're gonna hear this a lot. It's called realist. Okay. And that's why I suggested.
Yeah, you made this suggestion, Amir. I got the book on Amazon on the way.
Yeah, you're going to hear this a lot. You heard it from Sachs. You hear it from your generals. You hear it from Hexas. You hear it from Vance, and eventually you're going to hear it out of Trump's mouth. Okay, about realist. Okay, just get ready for it.
Yeah, people are still stuck on that Daughters of the Confederacy sort of rhetoric, like it's there, but they've made a decision. It's like you can hold on to this and die on that hill, or you could just go ahead and progress it and rule through technology and strength. And
the British Empire died over 100 years ago. Guess what they still believe in?
Yeah, that same modality. They're trying, kicking and screaming.
Starmer thinks they can force the United States to do something that they can't. Because we're British. We run the empire. They have to bow to our, we have to persuade them not to bow to our needs. No, Chief. It doesn't work that way anymore.
And that's interesting, seeing the old energy being revived between the United States and Russia when it specifically comes to that point.
One, you got a president that's not part of the British club, okay?
Yep.
Because he's a Prussian, okay?
Yep.
And so is he has a lot more in common with Putin than he does with the UK. Okay, which is one reason they didn't want him to be president.
Yep,
especially for a second time, is because he's not with the club, and so now he's willing. He doesn't have his loyalty is not to the UK or to to Western Europe. Period. Right.
Yep.
So
you don't have to play that game, and that's why I was telling people to pay attention to what's happening with the CIA right now, because that's where you start your rabbit hole search. And I'm speaking. Excuse me, for people in the playback that kind of want to get an understanding of what's being talked about without being said openly, just pay attention to what Tulsi Gabbard and what's the dude that's in the FBI now?
Kashi, what's in Kashi?
Cash.
Cash. Okay.
Yeah, man. The lids is being popped open off of all of that, and they're kicking and screaming trying to shut that down, and they're about to.
When Trump got shot in the ear, you knew this was coming.
Yeah. You
unleashed the Joker. Okay, basically that was his villain origin story when he got shot in the ear.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole issue now, man. Like he's crashing out in a way that is against the establishment, in a way that Bill Cooper. All you gotta do is go listen to Bill Cooper. Just look at what Bill Cooper's talking about the on the pale horse.
On the pale, he got murked for that. So
that's what I'm saying. So like all the information he was talking about, all of those, I would have never guessed a situation like this could have ever happened. And I don't think people get how hugely unprecedented this line of events is, and the type of ducks and barriers that are being removed for this to happen. I don't think they get how monumental this is.
Because it wasn't supposed to happen. And while he's still sane and while he's still alive, go listen to Steve Bannon, okay?
Oh yeah.
Before they shut him up. Before they shut him up. Because they're gonna shut him up eventually. But seeing while he's still around running his mouth, listen to what he's saying. Sometimes it doesn't make sense, but if you listen carefully and parse it out, he's giving you the playbook.
Oh yeah. And that's what I keep talking about, this window of opportunity, where fam, we're now officially the empire. People haven't gotten the message yet, but there's opportunities with that. If you play your cards right, you posture yourself correctly, we're getting a window that never was supposed to be there.
No, it wasn't.
Never supposed to be.
It was divinely what did the Biden say to Trump? Why'd you move your head?
Oh man, divine intervention or something, man.
Yeah.
We got somebody was messing with the timeline, like, bruh, nah.
Yeah, baby. You ain't
That's
shit.
what that was.
You ain't shit.
Man, we had a whole timeline shift on this one, man. So
you did. Okay.
Blame it on the guardian angel.
Better taking advantage of that, man.
Yeah, that's what I said. Sit back, man. I told people, I told when it happened, it's over. I said 2024, you will never see a political event like that. In 2025, economically, you won't see anything like it. Okay, so far I've been correct about just the first month. Never seen anything like this. Not in America.
BGS is always right.
Not always, but enough.
Man, the writing was on the wall.
Completely wrong. Just once, can you be completely wrong?
It's called Kansas City versus Philadelphia. I was completely wrong.
Oh, you ain't shit on that one. Oh, you ain't shit on
I was wrong. I mean, 100% wrong. In fact, that's it. I look at the game and say, why are you niggas trying to embarrass me like this?
So BJ, when you're wrong, do you ever, I don't know if anybody asked for an apology when you're wrong?
Apology. Whether I'm right or wrong, if I actually hurt somebody unintentionally, I always apologize. Okay, I don't care if I'm right. Okay. Because my intent is not to hurt people. Okay, so say if I hurt your feelings unintentionally, okay, I will apologize because I hurt your feelings. Wrong. So that's when I apologize.
Well,
our whole thing is
I didn't get an apology from you because I just want to say I didn't get an apology from you.
Because you needed the belt. No apologies for.
You didn't hear what I was gonna say.
I don't apologize to my grandson and my kids when they need the belt. Okay, I never apologize.
That's not what I was going for. That's
not what I was going for. I thought you Southern, man. I thought you know the switcher. You know the switcher. The switcher. What do they call it? The switcher.
Switches is for kids under 4. Okay. A switch to a kid over 5 is not gonna do shit.
Yeah, cause you know you have the old Southern woman that said, "Get that branch to me."
Yeah, I mean, basically for a adult, for a kid over 5, a switch is not gonna hurt that much. Okay. And basically,
the paddle's worse.
And I learned from my old uncles, right, that if you don't want to hurt a kid, you start disciplining early. So by the time they get to be 5 or 6, you don't have to put hands on them, because if they get up to above the age of 7, you're probably going to hurt them. Okay, so it's best to put discipline them early, like a switch on a baby's hand, a baby that's like 1 year old, when they're touching hot soap like that, it stings, but it's not going to hurt them. But they remember that. So by the time they get to be 5, they remember that sting, and all it needs is a look. Like my grandson, I haven't spanked my grandson since he was 2, maybe, and he's 12. So I think I spanked my son maybe 3 times. Okay. Once he got past the age of 2, maybe 3 times. Okay. So basically, I for the most part, my kids can tell you, I very, as far as discipline, I very seldom hit them. Very seldom.
Yeah. The apology I was asking for was when I said you kind of hurt my childhood with the thumbnail you had from one of your videos, the one with the chick with the afro in the DeLorean.
Oh, okay. Why did I hurt your childhood?
because I was like, that was an insult to all of us that way.
Oh,
As fucked up as the 2016 Ghostbusters movie was an insult to my childhood. I was like, what the hell?
Yeah, because
You can do better, man.
I was kind of trying to compare cars to females, right? And what's the most iconic car I could think of, which is the DeLorean Back to the Future, right? So you put a chick in the car, you're gonna compare cars to females. It lined up perfectly.
Well, it could have been like, somebody better, I was thinking somebody,
Like who?
more like a Jodie Whiteley or maybe somebody.
Now the bitch car came out of that car was fine as fuck. It was a cartoon, but she was fine as fuck.
She needed an Afro pick. That's what I would say. I would argue.
No, that's where Afros look. Especially back then.
I said she needed an Afro pick, sir. But yeah, you remember the picks back in the day?
Well, you're because you're African and you're not American audience. So
that's true because where I'm from, like in the lowlands, brothers had the froze, traditional froze, and they would have the pick in there.
Yeah, we that came from the 70s. We don't do that anymore. Okay, I had one of those. Okay.
Shit, I did before I got my locks. But then again, where I was at in DC, I was surrounded by the Ethiopian diaspora. They're everywhere.
Yeah, but the thing is, in the 70s, the 60s, and 70s, with the Black Power Afro, the pick with the fist.
I had with the pick and the peace sign, fam. I was pissing them folks off at work with that.
Yeah, because it's a rebellious symbol. That's why.
Well, my mom grew up in. Let me not say that. Let me not date that. I'll just say that she was around when they were on that type of time. So her ideology kind of rubbed off with regard to that. My grandma was on that type of time too. So it was real common. We got pictures of them all over the house with the froze just like that.
Yeah.
So
Angela Davis Afro.
Yeah. I mean, they tried to really pin me at work because they were claiming that my fro was distracting. They wanted to write me up.
Was it the Ethiopians who were complaining about it or what?
No, at my job. So I work for the government. So they were complaining because their whole argument is your hair can't touch your 2 inches below the collar. So my fro got so big that they were saying it was a distraction, and so that ended up being a big reason why I locked it. Yeah, they were trying to find a reason to write me up. It's hilarious.
Fro was actually a sign of rebellion for Black folks.
They got very uncomfortable when I had my fro, man. They really got scared.
Okay, should have walked in with some platforms.
Should have walked in with a black beret and a leather jacket.
Yeah, leather jacket, some platforms, and the fro, and the black power pick. Yeah. Oh yeah. Do it right.
Oh, speaking of which, I gotta mention this. In Eritrea,
also closing comments after that, fam, because it's 12 here now. So
all right. Traditionally, this like I said, most tribes had some form of an afro going back to the ancient times. So they had the fro pick, but there was this one group called the Saho. That's Saho. They're a Cushitic group, and the warriors traditionally had their hair like that, a fro, but at the back they had dreadlocks. Kind of had like how some guys used to, like in the 80s, used to have like a kind of flat top, and they had like a rat tail in the end. They used to have like dreads at the back like that instead. It was kind of interesting. You should look that up, Nameless. Interesting styles they had back then. You could have gotten inspiration that way, but hey, something to look at. Also, I've seen guys with froze and everything, but anyway.
I mean, I would go to the Ethiopian shop, right? So you'd see it in the pictures and the art that'll be in the stores.
Wait, are you sure it wasn't Eritrean? Because we had different textures and whatnot,
it's the same.
No, it's
group.
It's the same
group.
I don't want to insult you by saying that. I don't want to insult you by saying that, but listen,
they are the same group.
You know the meme. The meme is that y'all be eating injera with spaghetti and shit. So like,
no, that's the Somalis, but yeah.
So that's the way. Get your nationalities
right, damn it. I'm just kidding. We're gonna have this conversation when we go offline.
It's like a billion Chinese with 50 different groups, but the same fucking group. Come on now, it's gonna be very similarity. You're not West Africans, okay? That's a completely different group, okay?
They're true. Very true. So, anyway,
so I say Eritrea, blah blah blah. Yeah, I know, but you basically the same indigenous group for the most part. Okay,
And
grouping.
shout out to the Alpha.
Mhm.
Afar is a crucial. That's who the Sahos actually were closely related to. In fact, they can understand
That's
each other to a point. But anyway,
that's who everybody thought I was belonging to, because when I had my fro, everyone was always asking me if I was Alpha.
you know what you should have done? You should have had your like. You know what you should have done? Maybe you should have
Showed
like,
up there with no shirt on and a freaking AK-47 with no shoes.
Sound like man,
No.
fuzzy
No,
warriors.
No, that's not where I was going. You could have had like, no, what I was thinking is like, some people have like these fake dentures for Halloween and such.
Oh yeah, they
You
do
coulda had
the
one-
sharpen. No, the women do that,
They
right?
sharpen
With
their
the sharp teeth.
No, the men sharpen their teeth. They file their their front incisors into like the daggers.
They be out there looking like somebody from freaking Naruto.
I know
The
it's some
shark
scary
dude. No, I've seen
But
some
anyway.
women do that too, man. Because I thought it worked where I was at, and so yeah, they'd be in there and they'd have the sharp teeth like that. That's how you know.
shit. Yeah, it was scary as
But
hell.
yeah,
But-
go ahead, fam.
That's the Dojo Secession. Gilgami, s'il vous plaît, you have this. You start off first.
I came late to the show, but for many months I was looking for you, Nameless. It was actually to share one of the things I was finding out on the research on the Calhoun effect when you condense the two large populations into a smaller space.
Yes.
What I figured out when interrogating the elders in my research is that one of the ways actually in Imperial Africa to diminish such an effect was especially in Western Africa and Central Africa was when for some cities and towns reached a certain degree of populations, they forced the migration of other populations to another area specifically.
Wait, is that how you actually get the idea of Bantu in general?
It's part of the reasons. That's why actually all the cities tend to be, when stretched around one another, they tend to from the upper side to be spread into a fractal ways, even between different kilometers when the cities are apart. And that's really one of the reasons why, when, for example, the Europeans were coming on the coast of Africa, they observed there were few large cities and a series of many, many, many villages, despite the Africans having the technology and to build larger cities. The reason being that they figured out that once a population reaches a certain threshold, the behavioral sinks kicks in. So once it was coming close to certain populations, they forced the populations to migrate to a very specific area, which is one of the problems that Calhoun was observing in the mouse experiments. That the population of mice and rats were clustering in specific area instead of spreading, despite having enough resources.
Equally, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that must explain then some of the architectural designs for the major cities, such as Benin. In fact, we gotta study Benin, man. We gotta study Benin. Go ahead,
you guys are suggesting that African civilizations knew something that Western civilization didn't. Is that possible?
Go figure.
It's
Right?
impossible. The black skin. The black skin was preventing it. The black skin was preventing it.
right.
Is that possible?
Bro, we was just in trees, bro. Oh man, like the whole mud hut technology. Like when you tell people about the walls of Benin and they realize that it's actually one of the greatest migrations of physical material for our actual architectural structure in human history, like people just implode. They don't know how to understand that.
But I was observing that it would be quite problematic, for example, in Western societies, to move population in such a way because of the real estate market, which will prevent it actually.
You know what acts in the face of that? A lot of these agricultural grants for land that are coming out now. And I think you're going to start hearing a lot more about that in the very, 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 very near future. USDA land allotments. It's about to be a thing now. They need people to go out there and do the migration. Stacked on top of the fact that that's going to be how the technocracy expands. I think, do you remember the model, Gilgami, that I demonstrated with the liberal majority, conservative minority, and technocratic shadow class?
Yes, indeed, yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's how the technocracy gets in. It does so through the conservative minority by expanding to those, the whole inner city suburb migrational swap, right?
Mhm.
It's going to be through those agricultural grants that they get out there and start expanding the conservative side. And then on the liberal end, that's where you're going to see these hives self-contained. And through the use of the industrial revolutionary technology, that's how they're going to offset that. I think an intervention is probably going to be alternate reality, which is why I was saying in the liberal hive majority, that's why I highly suspect that people are going to have a preference for using augmented reality and the net essentially to have an alternative existence, which may bypass the behavioral sink downsides. You understand where I'm going?
Yeah, yes, indeed, yes, indeed. It will be one of the ways that they will be using to
Mitigate.
counter some of the effects, yeah, to mitigate the
Mm.
effects.
So
And I
name
think a textbook, I'll say this last point, I think a textbook example of that being successful would be the prison system. Go ahead.
Yeah.
nameless. Now should you anybody own what they call MetaQuest, those virtual goggles and stuff?
I know what you're talking about. I've seen people play Skyrim with that. Yeah.
Well, if you're talking about augmentation, that will be one of the stages of it, because virtual reality started to come around like the last decade. It's now in this decade is just slowly picking up. I will see it start accelerate within 4 years at best. You get me?
Well, what I mean,
when these new consoles come out, they're probably gonna push it even further.
well, what I mean is people having a preference for being in the alternative world rather than real life. That's the point I'm highlighting.
Yeah, the metaverse.
So that then serves as a bypass potentially to the downsides of the behavioral sink that occurs when a bunch of people are in close proximity like that. So they've already accounted for that on an engineering perspective, because every city has Calhoun's work in mind, where they have to obey certain rules and laws in the way they're organized. So what I'm saying, the next space that human beings can expand would be cyberspace. But again, it's kind of like this, what are the ultimate consequences of that, living in a world where people are opting for an alternative existence over their real one? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, it reminds me of those things like the games like Cyberpunk 2077, all that stuff. My thing is this: if you're already in a stage digitally where you don't want to interact with people personally, well, the final stage is the augmentation, because people are comfortable not seeing people eye to eye. Hell, you look at Gen Zs or ones that's coming up on us, don't even want to socialize at all. They want
a lot don't know how to without using a technological medium.
Yeah, they're gonna meet. Yeah, they're already antisocial, and the antisocial just gets worse as decades progress, as time progress. You get me?
But that's where you get the shift in values, where we think it's rude when someone's on a phone right next to you and they're essentially texting you when they could speak. But what happens when that becomes the new courtesy, the new normal? And it's just decided that it's easier for people to text. Maybe there's some sort of new sort of nomenclature that surrounds itself that describes these new emerging behaviors that historically we'd see as abnormal. But going back to Calhoun's experiments, there's another, I guess, release valve for behavioral sink behavior, at risk of being redundant with the terms. Again, I don't know, because we couldn't give the Mouse Utopia rats the internet, but that may be the new normal, and that may be a way things can continue until a more permanent solution can be met. But I think what that looks like is people not leaving the house and folks having avatars that represent who they are. And if they can use industrial revolutionary technology to really highlight that, we can get a rough prototype of what that looks like by hopping on Snapchat, Instagram, and TikTok.
Well, it was a good conversation. So next time I'm gonna try to make sure I come earlier so that the discussions can go for a longer period of time. So thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, I didn't announce this one, so this one came out a little random. So next time I will be given a couple days. Yeah, I give a couple days notice, and I'll mail you too, because we got to talk offline, Gilg. I mean, there's a lot of development that we got to catch up on, man.
Absolutely.
Man, have a good rest of your night, man. Peace. Os.
Bonne nuit. Yeah. Password OG.
Oh, well, I'll just say thank you for doing the panel, nameless, or just streaming nameless. I appreciate you because, well, one, you come out of left field and you don't know when you're going to come, and then you throw something and it gets in the subconscious, and your brain is calculating an answer to something that you're not worried about calculating yet. And that's one thing I appreciate about the complicated discussion. So, I mean, you've been here. Like you know what Japan looks like. Like they need something. They need something. Like you could tell, like they've got like a massive social problem like right around the corner, and they have no idea what to do with it. Nothing. I mean, and it's just you go to the supermarket at 12 in the daytime, and everyone's kind of slow moving, and then you go at nighttime, and it's borderline empty, and it's like this is not good. This is not good, man.
Fam, on top of that, have you seen, what do they call them? The kids that are standing on the side of the room with their cell phones that are basically prostitution, because that's the only thing they know how to do to get paid. Because the economy is going belly up.
Oh, the economy is. I mean, kids will straight up tell you, I want to be an influencer, and you try and tell them why don't you be something more notable? And they're like, well, one, I want to be home and see my family, and two, like, well, I'm going to make more money. Like, regular jobs aren't making that much money. So,
and they've got a lopsided time investment.
Yeah, man.
That overtime culture is different.
Yes. Yes, it is. People want to go home. But I appreciate the conversation, and I look forward to next time you pop up, good sir.
Absolutely, fam. Enjoy the rest of your night, man.
Mata kondo.
Anata mo.
Take care, man.
Peace.
Chaos?
I guess you up, Chaos.
Don't be shy now.
No, hold on. And people say that usually you want to plan these ahead of time, but the question should be asked, does a samurai always walk in silence? People should ask that question.
I will neither confirm or deny.
Okay. Answer my question. If y'all subscribe to the channel, and listen, y'all subscribe to the channel. Y'all know the deal. Sometimes, he'll do the content once in a while, but always check it, make sure it's still active. So one day you see a notification, or you look at your time like, wait, is his name what's going on? Let me hit the bell, and then that's all. That solves the problem. You get me?
Yeah, you can definitely anticipate some more pre-recorded content. I've got a lot of stuff recorded. I just got to get it in video form and upload it. So yeah, I definitely plan on reviewing and finishing up the Dokudo series. I'll be starting other different scrolls and Densho. I really want to get into Yagyu Munenori's work, The Life-Giving Sword, Katsujinkin. I think it's a brilliant book. I want to get into Takuan Soho's work, The Unfettered Mind. I want to start going over older military sciences like the 6 Secret Teachings and getting into that whole field of military science and synthesizing it with a lot of Western modalities and ideologies we work with. So that's definitely an angle I'd like to take. I'm going to do a composite conversation with political Mandalorianism as well. So you guys can kind of have it set aside and use it in a way that sort of serves your understanding. Because again, the goal of it is to give us a format to analyze these political events without having to really buy into the conditioning of conflict that we have when we disagree. Because I really think that our biggest issue is we have an underdeveloped software to handle disagreements, and it can't keep costing us trust. Because again, fam, we're all we got. We're all we got. We can't afford crash out after crash out after crash out, especially when generally there's nowhere else to go and you end up back here anyway. There's no point. especially and in particular when so many of us have different skills and perspectives, that if we just take a time to take a step back, we can just accept the perspective for what it is and keep it pushing.
Okay. I guess I'm up.
Chaos, if you didn't have anything else, man, yeah, it's up to you, Namer.
First of all, just to avoid the confusion between you and myself, Nameless, I'm gonna have to revert to my other name, Screwy, or Screwball Dirty. Hashtag cut off Namer, as Mr. Z likes to say every once in a while, because I'm long-winded. Just remember, folks, I'm still gonna be strutting like Mick Jagger, and I'm still gonna be playing that guitar left-handed like Jimi Hendrix. And I just look forward to having more conversations with you, Nameless. Just remember that, we are just going to be completely left field. You come out of left field, but I have to say, like Bane, you think darkness is your friend, or the left field is your friend. But I was born out of left field.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah. Oh, and as I always say, as usual, excuse my profanity, but y'all ain't shit. There will be shit. Or never have been shit. And God bless y'all for it. And yeah, I got the order messed up, but it is what it is, folks. I'll catch you on the out when we go offline.
Os.
Salamat. Bom lady.
And with that, I want to give any last second thanks. I think we got what happened here. Yeah, we did get a cash shot from Aquateki. I appreciate you, fam. Os. And honestly, man, thanks again for everything. Like I said before, you're gonna see me a lot more up here. Stay tuned. I'm gonna try to keep the open dojo sessions a bit more available. I think they'll be useful to help recap things that are going on in the space, things that have gone on in general. You guys can sort of fit. And I'd like to keep things to, the general frequency and tone that you see here, man, because there's a lot going on and there's a lot of unprecedented events that are taking place. And it's up to us, which is what the difference is. It's literally up to us to take advantage of these things and really terraform it to be of service to us. And unlike our ancestors, man, we've got way more agency and efficacy by ourselves and the capacity to just communicate. Just remember, logistics and communications are what wins wars. You could take the most sophisticated weapon in the modern era and go to any time period in history and recorded history. And the one thing that'll set you apart from everybody else is the ability to communicate, hands down. And the more sophisticated your form of communication, the more successful you're likely to become. Communication is and always will be key, followed by logistics. And with the fourth industrial revolution, your ability to access that and provide that is at a level we have never seen before. It will either put you in a position to where it will multiply your own capability, or it'll keep you divided and that much more ignorant with regards to it because it'll outpace you. However that ends up is up to you, fam. But with that said, to the founders of the space, os. To the dojo and the instructors on the panel, os. To the members in the chat and the playback, os. This is the Nameless Protagonist. I appreciate you joining me. Have a nice day.